At the beginning of the story, our MC Gilroshan is being chased by two monstrous warriors, both determined to kill him. As he runs for his life, his thoughts are frantic. Everything feels unreal. First he encountered a dragon, then he fell off a cliff, then came the giant squid monster, and somehow, he even rode on a dragon. Not long ago, he was just an average 30-year-old unemployed man. He struggles to understand how his mundane life spiraled into this chaotic mess, wondering how fate could twist so drastically. The scene transitions to a small room where the same man, before becoming Gilroshan, is seen using his laptop. On the screen, he notices a global chat where a user named Goddog posts a message saying, "Looking for Second Life challengers." Reading this, the man is confused, curious if someone else is experiencing similar hardships. He wonders when chats like these became common and whether this is part of some game. The phrase "Second Life" grabs his attention. He reflects on his own life. Growing up in an orphanage without parents, working in a factory after leaving, and now, at 30, juggling a part-time job while preparing for civil service exams. His only real joy came from a game called God-Forsaken World, or GFW, which he's been playing for over 10 years. In this time, he hasn't just become a veteran of the game, he's beyond that. His entire world is confined to a single-room apartment. He wonders if life came with a walkthrough. Would things have turned out differently? As he contemplates, another message pops up from the same user, stating they still need one more for a Second Life run. With no better plans, the man decides to play along, finding the idea mildly amusing. Another user joins in, excited about the Second Life. Goddog warns them it won't be easy, but the tone still feels unserious to the man. Their chat feels silly to him. He considers ignoring them altogether. Then comes a message. Whatever it is, it can't be worse than now. It's short and sincere, lacking any twist or punchline. Just as the man dismisses it, a voice unexpectedly echoes through his earphones. He hears the words, "Nonsense, you say?" The voice startles him. It continues, challenging him to survive this time. In a flash, he vanishes from his room. Disoriented, he starts to process the strange sensations. Something is covering his face. A gag. His hands are tied. Panic sets in. He fears he's been kidnapped and wonders if someone is after his organs. As he tries to piece things together, several figures stand in front of him. One of them addresses him directly, calling him the third prince of the Vault Magical Empire, Gilroshan. Shocked, the man realizes that he is no longer himself. He has become someone else, a fatty named Gilroshan. The gag is removed, and the speaker demands that he lift his head and open his eyes. Suddenly, the words trigger a memory. This moment is familiar. The speaker confirms it. They found the right person. Gilroshan realizes the line is from GFW, the assassination event of the third prince. It feels like he's reliving a scene from the game, but the situation quickly escalates. He is warned not to do anything foolish. Gilroshan questions why he is being called the prince and wonders if this is some elaborate prank by diehard GFW fans. The speaker informs him that he will be executed in the name of the Republic, and his head will be sent to the Emperor. Gilroshan panics and tries to explain that there has been a mistake, but his pleas are ignored. A sword is drawn and placed near his throat, leaving a shallow cut. The man explains that despite being a degenerate, Gilroshan still carries royal blood. The Emperor would not take the death of his son lightly. At this moment, Gilroshan fully realizes that this is not a prank, nor some immersive VR experience. This is real. He has become the disgraced third prince Gilroshan. Details about this identity come rushing in. Gilroshan Elo de Vault, third prince of the Vault Magical Empire. Infamously known as the Pig Prince, he was removed from the line of succession due to his laziness and shameful behavior. Gilroshan is just an extra NPC who dies during the tutorial phase of the game. But if he is the NPC, then who is the player? The executioner steps forward again and asks if he has any final words. Raising his sword, he prepares to deliver the fatal strike. Trembling, Gilroshan pleads that he doesn't understand what's happening and claims he is not the third prince. The executioner doesn't believe him. He points to the cursed red eye, a mark of royal blood, and his round, gluttonous body as further proof. For the soldiers, there's no doubt. This is the prince, and there will be no escape. Gilroshan panics, overwhelmed by the situation. He realizes he hasn't reincarnated as the protagonist, but as an insignificant extra. Not just any extra, but one about to be executed without delay. The sword-wielding man moves forward, promising to make the end quick, offering a farewell to the third prince before striking. As the blade nears, Gilroshan desperately searches for a reason to live. He knows there's something he must do, but the memory slips away. Suddenly, he opens his eyes and notices everything around him is frozen. Confused, he questions what just happened. In that still moment, a system message appears, announcing the start of the game and informing him that he will now play as the character, Gilroshan. Relief washes over him. He's alive because he is now the player. This world is inside the game he devoted years to, God-Forsaken World. He isn't just any player, he's a seasoned veteran. In this new reality, he becomes a living, breathing walkthrough manual. The system rewards him with a starter bonus, 3 stat points and 2 skill points, and a new quest, Escape the Crisis. Gilroshan understands that these points will help upgrade his character. The current quest is clear, survive the assassination attempt. With everything frozen, it's as if the game's pause function has activated, giving him a moment to act. He realizes time will resume the moment this selection phase ends. His life depends on the next decision. Stats and skills can wait. Right now, he must focus on survival. Another system message appears, initiating the fate card selection. It prompts him to confirm his fate. Fate cards are powerful tools, each offering a unique class, custom stats, exclusive skills, gear, and personalized storylines. From 1,024 total cards, only 3 appear at random, and only 1 can be chosen. No redraws until level 10, unless granted by a special quest. This single pull could define everything. As the shuffle begins, Gilroshan reflects on the gamble. The card selection demands strategy, but the options depend entirely on luck. Once the cards are revealed, time will resume, and if the draw goes poorly, he might be killed instantly. Tension rises. With the cards now in hand, he flips them over. Fear remains, but curiosity overpowers it. He wonders what fate has in store. Will it be the start of a glorious journey, or a path of endless misfortune? In God-forsaken world, there exists a hidden rule about first summons, known only to experienced players. Among the 3 random fate cards drawn, at least 1 must be a melee combat class to offer a stable early game path. The system usually ensures the average rank is around B. One of the revealed cards now is a D rank, a third-rate stage actor. Gilroshan hopes for something average but reliable, perhaps an A rank tanker. He flips the first card and sees an F rank destiny card, Slave Gladiator. Disbelief sets in. He flips the second card, another disappointment, a D rank third-rate stage actor. According to the rules, the average rank should have been B. That means his last card must be extraordinary. Filled with hope, he turns it over. A brilliant flash bursts from the card. It reveals a transcendent rarity, an X-rank Archmage. He's stunned. Transcendent cards are nearly impossible to obtain, even more so at the start of the game. Never in his years of playing had he seen this happen. The Archmage card is the ultimate ranged damage dealer. But why did it appear now? He considers the possibility. Maybe it's because he isn't a player-created character. He's inhabiting the body of Gilroshan Valte, an NPC with an established backstory. Though branded useless, Gilroshan carries royal lineage, and the Valte family is known for producing powerful mages. Now comes the critical choice. One of these cards might save him. But ironically, it's not the Archmage. Despite being the best on paper, its immediate utility is limited. The Archmage has defensive abilities like Spatial Distortion Field, but it only counters magical attacks. Worse, magic skills require time to activate and depend on mana gathered from a circle near the heart. There's no time for that now. Gilroshan knows that if he were an average player, he would have chosen the Archmage and died instantly. In the game, death meant respawning. But this is different. Here, if he dies, it's permanent. The cold steel at his throat makes that very clear. Someone had dragged him into this world, placed him in an NPC's body, and gave him player powers moments before execution. The appearance of the Archmage card now felt more like mockery than mercy. He recalls the voice in his earphones, urging him to survive no matter what. That memory sparks his resolve. Determined to live, he selects the F-rank Destiny card, Slave Gladiator. He silently bids farewell to the Archmage card, hoping to cross paths again someday. The system responds. The Slave Gladiator card is now equipped. He gains access to 3 exclusive skills. Gameplay will resume in 5 seconds. The system wishes him luck. Gilroshan scoffs at the message. Luck? He had already run out of that. Still, even with a ruined character, re-rolling isn't an option here. In the original story, this character bled out and died on the spot. But now that Gilroshan has taken over, survival is the only option. The real question now is how to use these newly gained skills. The system ends the pause. Time resumes. The attacker strikes immediately with his sword and walks away, satisfied. He informs his comrades that the mission is complete. Their return route, as planned, will go through the Mokman mountain range gate. But then, one of his companions notices something strange. The third prince is still alive. The attacker is shocked. He insists that he clearly slit the prince's throat. Gilroshan, trembling from the tension, feels relieved as he instinctively activates the skill just in time. But the sensation of using it leaves him deeply unsettled. The system confirms the skill's successful activation and informs him that it won't be available again for the next 24 hours. It then reveals the Slave Gladiator card's 3 exclusive skills: Taste for Masochism, Taste for Sadism, and Taste for Bondage. Gilroshan reflects on his choice, recalling why he gave up the Transcendent card. This F-rank card is notorious among players who enjoy bizarre and unconventional playstyles. Although the skills seem powerful, each comes with major limitations. Their situational usefulness is rare, which is exactly why the card is ranked so low. Suddenly, the enemy who had attacked earlier notices him alive and expresses disbelief. Gilroshan realizes that if the man goes for his neck again, he won't survive. He needs to act first. The man tries to make sense of the situation, but Gilroshan interrupts by loudly declaring the enemy's name, Vero Di Marco, causing a moment of shock. The enemies freeze, confused by how he knows the name. Gilroshan declares that the one residing in this body is none other than the god of revenge, Eolrium himself. He mentally recounts that these men are clerics of the Revenge Order under the Eolrium Grand Church. Ironically, they're also assassins working for the Revolutionary Army, one of the game's 3 major factions. As part of their plan to overthrow the Empire, they had kidnapped the third prince, Gilroshan. To survive, Gilroshan must now act like he had drawn the third-rate stage actor card. No, even beyond that. He continues his divine act, proclaiming that he, Eolrium, has descended into this body and is furious. He demands his restraints be removed immediately. The men hesitate, asking if he's truly the vessel for their god. Gilroshan steps forward, grabs one of them by the face, and scolds him harshly for pointing at the god's body. He wonders if he's overacting but reassures himself that this is exactly how Ilrium behaves. In this cursed world, 12 gods exist, most of whom interfere frequently in mortal affairs. These divine interventions cause both minor and major incidents across the land. After the game's release, many players thought the name God-Forsaken World was an exaggeration, but it fits. Ilrium, the god of vengeance, is especially meddlesome, showing up often during conflicts, wars, and disputes. This trait works in Gilroshan's favor for now. The man, now convinced, asks Gilroshan to show a sign of faith to his unworthy followers. Gilroshan snaps back, ranting about their lack of faith. He reminds them about the golden statue they offered last week, revealing he knew it was merely gold-plated. Furious, he threatens them and demands they untie him immediately. The group apologizes and obeys, quickly releasing his restraints. Internally, Gilroshan notes that most of them seem to have fallen for the performance. It's hard to imagine the notoriously incompetent third prince pulling off such a feat, which helps sell the lie. However, he remains cautious, especially of the older man, Marco. The narrative introduces Marco, a sharp-minded former adman from Sangmi who now leads the Revenge Order. A strategic assassin for the Revolutionary Army, Marco had orchestrated the assassination plot against the third prince. Marco apologizes for not recognizing the god sooner. Gilroshan, maintaining his godly persona, demands more. He orders them to kneel. The group obeys, pleading for forgiveness from Lord Ilrium. Marco expresses regret and reverence for the unexpected encounter, yet he questions why no oracle was given to the high priest before the god's descent. Gilroshan senses Marco's suspicion, and another figure behind him also catches his attention. He becomes increasingly uneasy, realizing he needs a stronger safety net. He issues a divine warning. The third prince, Gilroshan himself, is to be officially designated as Ilrium's chosen apostle. No one is to harm him. The declaration startles Gilroshan, but he quickly adapts, confirming the statement. He declares that the third prince will one day join the Revolutionary Army. Marco accepts the divine will and agrees to spare Gilroshan's life. But Gilroshan knows this won't be enough. Once they return, they'll likely verify everything with the high priest and come hunting again. Marco's confident stare makes it clear he's capable of killing Gilroshan at any moment. The assassination couldn't have happened without an insider. No matter how useless the third prince might be, no one from the imperial bloodline should be this vulnerable. It confirms Gilroshan's fear. The empire is a closed cage and there's no way out. He quickly improvises, announcing that the third prince will not return to the imperial palace. Instead, he'll head to Arrakis. He will soon become an apostle, and preparations must be made. Marco questions this statement. Gilroshan demands that the prince be safely escorted to Arrakis, treated with utmost respect and protection. Gilroshan then reflects on Arrakis. It's the largest city in the west and the capital of the Revolutionary Army. While it's enemy territory for a prince of the empire, Gilroshan knows the future storyline. That knowledge makes it the safest place for now. In Arrakis, knowledge translates into power. While it's unfortunate to leave the Archmage card behind, Gilroshan knows there are still many ways to cheat the system. With renewed determination, he commands the group to move out. In his mind, he sets his next goal: to turn this trash character into an overpowered legend, no matter how many cons it takes. Gilroshan sat among Marco's companions as they eagerly offered him food, insisting he try each of their dishes. They urged him with proud smiles, claiming they had worked hard to catch the meat and perfect the preparation. Each man pushed his plate forward, boasting that his version tasted better grilled. Annoyed, Gilroshan yelled at the old men to stop forcing food on him. He reminded them he was trying to lose weight and didn't appreciate their constant pressure. Yet they pleaded for him to have at least one bite, stating they were only following the divine orders to treat him with utmost respect. Their sincerity, however, made Gilroshan second-guess his earlier outburst. He looked at their innocent faces, thinking they resembled a cheerful boy band more than vengeful assassins. He urged them to stop tempting him, confessing that he also wanted to eat but was holding himself back. One man tried to reassure him, saying there was no need for weight loss, that his figure had been perfect from the start. Gilroshan wasn't convinced and called him a terrible liar. Before the moment could get too relaxed, Marco stormed in, scolding everyone for being careless. He reminded them that they were still within enemy territory and should remain alert. His presence instantly shifted the mood, pulling everyone out of their cheerful haze. He then turned to Gilroshan, explaining that their overzealousness came from their deep faith, and asked him not to judge them too harshly. Gilroshan nodded in understanding. Marco held up a piece of meat, joking that he'd brought it for himself and that it was bird meat. Gilroshan replied with sarcastic disapproval. Marco noticed Gilroshan's weight loss and commented on it. Gilroshan admitted even he hadn't expected to lose so much in just 3 days. Marco, who had grown up as an assassin within the church, remarked that despite having seen many types of people, he'd never met anyone as tenacious as Gilroshan. Gilroshan reflected on his doubts at the beginning, uncertain how he would survive the journey through imperial territory. A flashback followed, showing Gilroshan walking with the group, clearly struggling. His body ached, and exhaustion overwhelmed him. He wondered what kind of body he had ended up in. With stamina at only 9, far below the average range of 40 to 60, his condition was closer to that of a corpse. He knew he had to increase his stamina and lose weight to survive. Marco had noticed his collapse and expressed concern, shocked that he was already out of energy so early in the journey. Another man pointed out the danger they all faced if Gilroshan couldn't keep up, but reminded the others that abandoning him was not an option, as they had divine orders to protect him. They considered using a potion, but Gilroshan firmly refused. He didn't want to be a burden or risk them having to fight in his place. Determined to push through, Gilroshan slammed his forehead into the ground, then stood up again. He declared there was no need for a potion and urged them to continue. At that moment, the system activated his taste for masochism skill, applying its effect for 30 seconds. He knew that low stat points like his could be improved through intense physical exertion rather than using precious skill points. If he truly wanted to change, he had to be willing to endure pain. Slamming his head repeatedly had startled the group. They could hardly believe that this tough individual was the same third prince they had known. The system notified him that his stamina had increased, confirming that his method, though extreme, was working. Back in the present, Gilroshan acknowledged that this was only the beginning. He still had a long road ahead. Marco informed Gilroshan that by the next day, they would reach the teleport gate they had previously used. It would take them back to Orax. However, he revealed a complication. Their original mission had been to assassinate Gilroshan, not escort him alive. No one had anticipated that Gilroshan would become Lord Aelim's apostle. Gilroshan acknowledged the situation, stating plainly that there was an accomplice within the Empire and encouraged Marco to speak openly. Marco confirmed it. Their orders had been to leave behind a corpse as proof of mission success. But now that the third prince hadn't returned, the co-conspirators would suspect something had gone wrong. And since their identities were exposed, predicting their escape route would be easy. The teleport gate was most likely already blocked. Despite the complication, Marco remained confident. As members of the Vengeful Priesthood, the elite unit of the Revolutionary Army, they could break through. But a pincer attack from both front and rear would make things difficult. It was already a risky situation, and now they needed to move even faster. Curious, Marco asked how Gilroshan knew about the hidden accomplice. Gilroshan named the Imperial Minister of the Interior, Viscount Zyrek Moss. Marco asked what led him to this conclusion. Surprised by the question, Gilroshan recognized it wasn't just a test. Barmal was clearly trying to understand his capabilities. To control the Vengeful Priesthood even temporarily, he had to prove his intelligence. He began thinking through the logic carefully, already familiar with Zyrek Moss's background and actions. Gilroshan explained that while the Minister of the Interior served the Empire, his roots were Cainese. The war between the Empire and the Cainese over the northwestern territories had occurred not too long ago. Moreover, the Cainese maintained ties with the Revolutionary Army. Recently, Zyrek Moss's daughter had married into a noble family located near the border, an area constantly experiencing small conflicts despite the truce between the Empire and the Revolutionary Army. Given the region's instability, the nobleman could either be a sworn enemy or a secret ally of the Revolutionary Army. The marriage appeared strategic, suggesting collaboration. The target being the Great Church of Aelim further indicated that the son-in-law might be a follower of Aelim, or perhaps even a priest. Each of these connections pointed directly toward Zyrek Moss as the likely traitor. Enjoying the deduction process, Gilroshan found himself wishing he had studied like this during school. Marco, impressed and surprised, couldn't believe the third prince had hidden such sharp insight. This perspective was completely different from what people usually believed about him. Gilroshan noticed the shift in Marco's gaze. He wasn't just reassessing him, he was reassessing Gilroshan, the identity he had taken over. Still, the reality remained that their retreat had been cut off. Gilroshan, who should have died 4 days ago according to the story, had survived. His unexpected survival had altered the flow of the entire game's events. Knowing this, Gilroshan anticipated that Minister Zyrek would now play his strongest card. The closest defense force to the Lockman Mountain Gate northeast of the capital, Kurtian, was already in position. That elite unit was the Special Knights, and their commander was none other than Marquis Elron Reut. Marco emphasized that they needed to shake off their pursuers and reach the gate. It was going to be tough, but they had to endure. If they got caught between enemies from both sides, the situation would become truly dire. Gilroshan, however, firmly disagreed. In his view, breaking through wouldn't be possible. When Marco asked for an alternative, Gilroshan explained his plan. He needed to find a new path, one not taken even during his time playing the game. It was a path that both he and Gilroshan must now walk together. Before Marco could finish reminding him of Lord Aelim's command to ensure his safety, Gilroshan interrupted, asking them to wait at that very spot. Marco was confused by the request and asked what they were waiting for. At that moment, another man stepped forward, confronting Gilroshan. He correctly guessed that Gilroshan intended to wait for the bear and the nightingale, his personal guards who were currently pursuing them. He challenged Gilroshan aggressively, mocking his silence and threatening to force an answer with his sword if needed. Gilroshan responded with a mocking smile, questioning why he should answer someone he didn't even know. He mocked the man's short temper and hinted that High Priest Barmal wouldn't appreciate such behavior. The response enraged the man. Gilroshan rose to his feet and declared two things. First, he had no intention of returning to the Imperial Palace. If that had been his goal, he wouldn't have gone through so much effort to keep up with the Vengeful Priesthood. Second, the man was correct. He was waiting for the bear and the nightingale. But he didn't owe an explanation, especially not to someone he didn't recognize. He made it clear that he despised people like him. The man, furious, grabbed Gilroshan by the collar, claiming he had saved his life and deserved more respect. In that moment of tension, Gilroshan noticed the faint scent of flowers, just as Marco stepped in to de-escalate the situation. Marco introduced the angry man as Irgal. Though not officially part of the church, Irgal was considered a comrade who supported the revolution's greater cause. Gilroshan quietly assessed the situation. Irgal's manner and background made it clear he was a mercenary. In the game, God-Forsaken World, player characters rarely belonged to fixed organizations and usually roamed freely like mercenaries. The name Irgal was unfamiliar, suggesting he might not be an NPC at all. Perhaps, like Gilroshan, he too came from the real world. Now calmer, Irgal demanded an explanation, asking again why Gilroshan insisted on waiting for the bear and the nightingale. The narration briefly shifted to introduce these two figures. The bear referred to Kal's Silion, a 6-star knight and Gilrosian's personal bodyguard. The nightingale was Tarvayan Sui, a 7-star witch and Gilrosian's magic teacher. Irgal pressed on, asking Gilroshan directly to explain the reason for waiting. Losing patience, he turned to Marco and suggested they should kill Gilroshan right then and there to end the delays. But Gilroshan responded with a sharp counter. He asked if they both knew the commander of the Special Knights, Marquis Elron Reut. Marco confirmed that he did, recognizing him as one of the Empire's 3 greatest swordmasters. Gilroshan then delivered the harsh truth. None of them could defeat Reut. If they continued toward the gate, the Marquis would kill every last one of them. He told Irgal that if he wished to die so badly, he should do it alone. The scene cut to a short explanation of Elron Reut. He had reached the 9th star realm with his sword, which, in player terms, placed him at around level 90. He was an incredibly powerful NPC, one of the strongest on the entire continent. Gilroshan concluded by stating that fighting the Marquis wasn't entirely a bad option, if the goal was to vanish without leaving a corpse behind. Irgal acknowledged that if the Empire's dagger lay just ahead, then proceeding further would be no different from walking straight into death. Gilroshan silently noted that Irgal's reaction was unexpected. Instead of yelling or demanding proof, he responded with reason. It seemed Irgal wasn't completely brainless after all. Marco then raised a concern. If what the third prince said was true and Elron Reut and his knights were indeed guarding the gate, then even the arrival of the bear and the nightingale wouldn't help. The situation would still be hopeless. Gilroshan offered a solution. If they followed his lead, they could reach the gate and safely enter Orax. But before proceeding, he requested 2 promises. First, he asked that everything he was about to reveal remain a secret. Marco responded with slight sarcasm, questioning what kind of promise required a pinky swear. Gilroshan instead asked him to swear in the name of the god Aolem. Respecting the request, Marco placed his hand on Gilroshan's and swore in Aolem's name to take the prince's words to the grave. Gilroshan then added a second condition. If they reached Orax safely, he wanted Marco to get him an item. When asked what kind of item, Gilroshan clarified that it wasn't anything fancy, just a pair of glasses, available only in Orax. Marco agreed and swore once more in the name of Aolem. Gilroshan then began to reveal the truth. The man known as Kars Silion, the one they referred to as the Bear, was once a high-ranking knight of the Empire's Holy Order. After the Empire fractured, he defected to the Northern 5 Kingdoms and became the commander of the True Light Order. But the truth ran deeper. His real name wasn't Kars Silion, it was Kars Reut. Marco was stunned. Gilroshan confirmed the suspicion. Kars was the illegitimate son of Elron Reut. Almost no one, including Kars himself, knew this. Elron was the only one aware of the connection. As Gilroshan pieced things together, he became certain that Irgal knew more than he let on. If Irgal was from the same reality as Gilroshan, then he had likely figured out Gilroshan's true identity. After all, the third prince was supposed to be dead. That raised a deeper question. Just how much did Irgal know about this game world? Meanwhile, at another location, Kars and Sui were engaged in battle with Marco's men. Kars accused them of kidnapping the prince and demanded his immediate release. From the soldiers' perspective, though, it was technically a kidnapping, but now the prince was following them willingly. Elsewhere, Gilroshan was rushing toward the conflict. He had left markings along the way to help Kars track them, but Kars had arrived faster than expected. With Sui about to join the fight, Gilroshan feared the priest would go all in, ready to die for their cause. Time was running out. Back on the battlefield, Sui issued a stern warning. She demanded to know where they had taken Gilroshan. One of Marco's men tried to speak, but she silenced him with fury. She declared that she would reduce them to ashes and find Gilroshan herself. At that moment, Gilroshan appeared and asked for a moment to speak. Both Kars and Sui were stunned at the sight of him. Gilroshan confirmed his identity. It was truly him. Kars was furious. He demanded to know what had been done to Gilroshan to make him look so worn down. Marco's men silently wondered if they were truly at fault, as they hadn't really done anything to harm him. Gilroshan began to explain. While he had been kidnapped at first, that was no longer the case. Sui, however, exploded in anger. She cursed him out, furious that after all her efforts, this was what he had to say. She threatened to blow up the rebels and ordered Gilroshan to stand still and obey her. Her temper showed no sign of restraint. Gilroshan internally questioned if she was really a witch or just foul-mouthed because of it. Her rough demeanor made her seem more like a thug than a magical scholar. He then recalled what he knew about her. Sui was a witch born from the prestigious 5-colored spires of the Vault Magic Empire. Rumors claimed she was an old crone over 200 years old who bathed in virgin's blood. But in truth, Tervan Sui was just 19 years old. The witches in her lineage passed on not only their magic but also fragments of their memories and even their appearance through a one-on-one inheritance ritual. This preserved the aura of fear and mystique around them. Kars, noticing the rising tension, urged Sui to calm down. He didn't sense any immediate danger and suggested they hear everyone out first. Blushing slightly, Sui agreed and softened her tone. Gilroshan quietly observed her reaction and confirmed what he suspected. She had a clear weakness for handsome men. Gilroshan finally faced Kars and declared his decision to head toward Orax. Kars was shocked, reminding him that Orax was enemy territory, the stronghold of revolutionaries opposing the empire. But Gilroshan stood firm, fully aware of the danger. This choice, he said, wasn't reckless foolishness. It was his will, his chosen fate, and the only path he could walk for survival. He asked Kars not to stop him, and humbly sought forgiveness from Sui, assuring her that he hadn't abandoned magic. He was simply waiting for the right moment, and thanks to her guidance, he still believed he would one day acquire the multicolored light. Sui, taken aback, watched him closely. She remembered how he used to avoid eye contact, pretending to have no talent or interest in magic. But now, something about his gaze had changed. Hearing him mention the multicolored light, an ancient phrase from the teachings of the five-colored tower, left her stunned. Most magicians didn't even know that saying anymore. Yet, Gilroshan remembered. He had been hiding his passion and craving for magic all along. Realizing her failure as a teacher, Sui silently blamed herself for not seeing through him during the past 5 years. Gilroshan then asked both Sui and Kars to stay by his side. Sui, without resistance, agreed. She explained that, as the fallen teacher of the reckless third prince, it was now her duty to trust the student who had finally found his way. And maybe, just maybe, this prince might even make her the next master of the five-colored tower. Privately, Sui remained worried about Kars. She had learned about him during her search and knew he was a strict loyalist with unwavering principles. He would never compromise. Even if the prince commanded otherwise, Kars's goal would remain the same, to return him to the palace safely, even if that meant using force. But Kars surprised her. With tears in his eyes, he knelt before Gilroshan and swore his unwavering loyalty. He promised to follow Gilroshan's will, path, and destiny. Anyone who stood in the prince's way would fall before Kars's sword. With that, the system confirmed that both Kars and Sui had officially joined the party. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Kars' father waited impatiently for news. A subordinate approached, reporting that traces of the fugitives had been found, though they were skilled at creating confusion. The captain's expression darkened. Gilroshan in his eyes was nothing but a nuisance. His youngest son, Kars, should have been a slave under imperial law, but after great effort, his father had cleansed his status and entrusted him to the Cillian family. Instead of rising in honor, Kars had been reduced to serving the reckless third prince. Now, with Gilroshan's actions dragging Kars down even further, his father's resentment deepened. He silently cursed Gilroshan, believing Kars was one of the empire's most promising young men. Though Kars had returned unharmed from this incident, his father feared that continuing under Gilroshan's influence would lead to worse consequences. He resolved that if the prince was removed, Kars would be reassigned to the knights. His subordinate then asked about Sui and Kars being in pursuit of the prince. Though Sui was a 7-star witch, her poison fire magic wasn't suitable for tracking, so the chance of her succeeding was slim. Hearing this, the captain smirked. He believed the heavens favored them. Their mission now was to block the kidnappers' escape route and annihilate them. Hostages didn't matter. There would be no negotiations, only elimination. The subordinate acknowledged the order, and the captain commanded everyone to move out. As the special unit advanced, the captain reflected grimly. The Special Task Night Order wouldn't consider Gilroshan's safety. Their focus was solely on killing the intruders. And if blood flooded the battlefield, so be it. Kars approached from behind, startling Gilroshan, who turned in surprise. Noticing the sword in Gilroshan's hand, Kars questioned him, curious about his deep thoughts and the weapon's purpose. Gilroshan simply replied that he needed it for something. Kars then observed that the prince's face looked slimmer and more defined, even complimenting his appearance. Gilroshan dryly responded, recalling the brutal mountain climbs with old men that felt like sheer madness. Surviving that, he said, was a miracle in itself. Kars chuckled, relieved that at least Gilroshan had made it out alive. Gilroshan, however, was puzzled by Kars' gentle behavior. Kars admitted how painful the chase had been, and how much he had feared something terrible might happen. Internally, Gilroshan reflected on their relationship. In the original story, they were like brothers, distant relatives who had grown up together. Though Gilroshan now lived in a different reality, Kars' presence still warmed him. He wasn't just a character anymore. Kars Loit, known as the Knight of Dawn, was now a real, living person, a dependable tanker in the game, and someone who once always stood by his side. Sui appeared, and casually asked if Gilroshan had slept well. Gilroshan noted how hard it had been to recruit Turbane in the original game, so he hadn't used him as much as Kars. Maybe that's why his feelings for Kars felt stronger. Or maybe it was something left behind from Gilroshan's original self. Kars turned to Sui and politely asked the same, inviting her to join them. Sui, slightly shy, said she'd wash up first before joining the conversation. Watching them, Gilroshan felt a dull ache in his chest, like a weight of unresolved guilt. Kars then noted how sharp and energetic the prince looked now, like they had gone back to the old days. Gilroshan asked what he meant, and Kars recalled their time at the Royal Academy, a school for children of high nobility. Kars reminisced about Gilroshan's brilliance back then, how palace staff adored him, and even the emperor cherished him. This revelation surprised Gilroshan. In the game or the novel, there was no mention that the third prince had once been a bright, promising child. Kars then pondered how different life would have been if the Vault Empire didn't prioritize magic so highly. Perhaps even Gilroshan's life would have changed. Gilroshan agreed silently. Being born as a prince in a magic-dominated empire without any magical talent must have been isolating. The high hopes people had once held slowly faded as he aged, making him feel deeply abandoned. Still, those weren't his memories. They belonged to someone else. He dismissed the nostalgia and urged Kars to stop dwelling on the past. No one remembered the third prince from those academy days anymore, no one but Kars. It was time to focus on the present. Kars agreed without hesitation. Gilroshan admitted that it was lucky no one recognized him anymore, as fate had worked in his favor. With a quiet resolve, Gilroshan reaffirmed his confidence in mastering the god-forsaken world. He didn't care if people saw him as a worthless prince with no talent. He wouldn't give up. Instead of becoming a legendary magician, he had been reborn as a mere F-class slave gladiator. But there would always be another chance. Looking straight at Kars, Gilroshan declared his intent to prove his worth, to return alive, and to ensure no one would dare look down on his companion, his brother, and his loyal knight. Kars, with his usual pride, joked that his posture was always perfect. Gilroshan groaned at the joke, and Kars grinned, saying he was only teasing. At that moment, Sui returned. Gilroshan, seeing that everyone was present, began explaining the plan ahead. He reminded Kars why he couldn't return to the Imperial Palace, noting the presence of too many traitors. Kars acknowledged this, mentioning that Gilroshan had already spoken about it. Gilroshan brought up Marquis Alan Loit from the northern capital, a loyal friend of Kars's father and one of the Empire's 3 swordmasters. Kars, shocked, denied the possibility of the Marquis being a traitor. Gilroshan agreed. Marquis Loit was a true patriot and an honorable warrior. The issue was that he now blocked their escape route and would likely eliminate the assassins and drag Gilroshan back to the palace. Worried, Kars asked if they should try persuading the Marquis like they had with him and Sui. But Gilroshan doubted that would work. Marquis Loit wouldn't listen. Kars admitted the grim truth. The Inquisitors would be wiped out, and they would all be dragged back in chains. Gilroshan reassured him that he wasn't disappointed. Both Sui and Kars asked if he had another method. Gilroshan, raising his sword, stated that his plan was simple. He would defeat Marquis Loit and pass through. The only way forward was through battle. This left them both in shock. Kars questioned Gilroshan's health, reminding him that he was still just human. Sui sighed, frustrated that he hadn't come to his senses yet and wished he would just go home and rest. Kars even grabbed Gilroshan's head and shook it, asking if he was truly feeling all right. Gilroshan, irritated, wondered why they were being so impatient. He told them to at least listen to his strategy before reacting so harshly. Kars, still angry, asked what they were even supposed to do against a commander like Marquis Loit. Sui, reflecting on her own regrets, whispered that she wished she had taken more interest in magic earlier. Meanwhile, Gilroshan internally rationalized their concerns. In the god-forsaken world, the stat boosts from leveling weren't significant. And the Marquis was just an NPC who didn't benefit from fate cards. With well-planned counters, traps, and psychological tricks, even a 6-star character could defeat a 9-star opponent. Gilroshan's companions waited anxiously as Sui, now calm, asked him to share his plan in detail. Gilroshan explained that he would challenge the Marquis to a noble duel and simply knock the sword from his hands, nothing more. Kars immediately rejected the idea, calling it impossible. The narration introduced the concept of a noble duel, a conditional one-on-one match rooted in Vault Empire law and noble tradition. Rules and victory conditions were decided mutually by both parties and a witness. Gilroshan selected Kars as the witness and declared that he would set the terms of the duel to tilt things in his favor. He planned 3 specific conditions. Swords only, immediate loss upon dropping one's sword, and no armor allowed. Kars stood up in protest. The conditions, in his view, offered no advantage. Swords-only combat favored the Marquis, a top-tier swordsman. The rule about dropping weapons would naturally place the weaker participant, Gilroshan, at risk. And removing armor was reckless, stripping away protection. Kars flatly refused to be the witness if these rules stood, unwilling to endanger Gilroshan's life. Gilroshan tried to ease his concern, claiming there was no danger. To prove his logic, he asked Kars to imagine himself as a veteran swordsman of 50 years, challenged by a rookie prince under the same terms. Kars admitted that he would find such a challenge absurd, and would likely hold back to avoid injuring the young noble. Gilroshan concluded that the Marquis would also hesitate, especially with Kars present as a witness, making the duel safer than it seemed. Kars then questioned why the Marquis would harbor any grudge. Gilroshan, keeping secrets close, internally admitted the truth. Kars's real father wanted Gilroshan dead for political reasons, but instead told Kars there was just bad blood between them. Kars, still unsure, asked for clarification, but Gilroshan deflected, unable to reveal the deeper motive just yet. Meanwhile, Sui, still puzzled, mentioned the priest squad's absence. Gilroshan calmly responded that he had sent them on an errand. The scene then shifted to those very priests, now shown tying goblins to a tree. The men bantered about which one had caught the more impressive goblin, convinced that Gilroshan would be pleased. As the squabble continued, Marco arrived, reprimanding their lack of decorum. He reminded them that true faith should be calm and sincere. One of the men accused another of cheating, prompting Marco to snap back. He emphasized the effort he had invested in capturing the goblins and dismissed the complaints. Someone asked about the captives previously held by the goblins. Marco revealed he had released them, instructing them to return to their village and give thanks to the god Eolim. He assured his men that they had caught enough and that preparations were complete. It was now time to fetch Prince Gilroshan. The group quickly descended into arguments over who should deliver the message, each claiming a closer connection to the prince. Marco silenced them, warning that though Gilroshan might be a future apostle, they could not grow too attached until the archbishop officially confirmed it. For now, he was still a prince from a rival nation. Finally, Marco turned to Urgal and tasked him with retrieving Gilroshan. Urgal accepted the order and began walking away. As he moved, his thoughts revealed a hidden motive. He saw this moment as the perfect opportunity to uncover Gilroshan's true intentions and decide his next move accordingly. As the scene continued, Gilroshan rose from his seat and signaled that everything should be wrapping up soon. He suggested they continue their conversation while moving. Sui, confused by his statement, asked what he meant. Gilroshan clarified that he had tasked the priest order with clearing out the nearby goblin village, and by now, the job should be finished. However, he insisted that the final blow must be delivered by him, the third prince, Gilroshan. The narrative then revealed details about the damp goblin village, describing it as a settlement inhabited by seasoned goblins. It was labeled unsuitable for beginners, indicating its danger and complexity. While walking, Gilroshan mentioned his trump card, knowledge of the Marquis's weakness. Kars chimed in, noting a commonly known flaw, the Marquis's relatively poor synergy between magic and swordsmanship. Sui added that she had also heard rumors about the inefficiency of his magic output. Gilroshan acknowledged that while this weakness was real, it only mattered when comparing the Marquis to other top-level swordsmen. He then revealed a far more serious issue. The Marquis currently suffered from a paralyzed right shoulder. Internally, Gilroshan recalled that in-game, Marquis Roit appeared with a paralyzed shoulder for unknown reasons. This detail, though mysterious in the game, became a critical advantage in real life. Sui was surprised by the information, admitting it was new to her. Gilroshan responded affirmatively, insisting it was true. When asked where he heard it, he decided to lie slightly and claimed he had overheard a conversation between the Emperor and the captain of the Imperial Knights. Sui accepted this explanation, trusting its accuracy. Kars processed the implications quickly. If the injury were real, the Marquis would be unable to perform vanguard swordsmanship, a technique that required the use of both hands. Gilroshan confirmed this, reinforcing his tactical advantage. The narration then provided insight into vanguard swordsmanship, a secret technique of the Roit family, one of the Empire's most prestigious swordsmanship houses. It emphasized cleaving sword principles using a two-handed sword. When used with the Roit family's legendary blade, Howlblade, damage increased by 20%. Gilroshan, deep in thought, reflected on the significance of this information. Vanguard was a top-tier cleaving technique and the very skill that elevated Elrond Roit to the rank of 9-star. It also had perfect synergy with his Howlblade, making the right shoulder injury a decisive weakness in the upcoming duel. Sui acknowledged that if the Marquis couldn't use his signature technique, then perhaps there was indeed a path forward. However, Kars quickly reminded them that a swordmaster remained formidable regardless. Even with one hand, the captain could wield a sword at a 7-star level, far beyond Gilroshan's current capabilities. Internally, Gilroshan grew frustrated, questioning Kars's loyalty. Still, he agreed aloud, admitting that what Kars said was true. But he revealed another critical piece. He already knew which sword technique the Marquis would resort to when using just one hand. Kars was stunned that Gilroshan even knew that much. Reflecting to himself, Gilroshan recalled how in the Sinverse world, sword techniques had specific affinities. Because of this, even the weakest skills could become extraordinarily powerful when matched correctly. So if the condition of the duel was only to make the Marquis drop his sword, then there remained a slim chance of success. Suddenly, from beside a nearby tree, Irgal's voice broke in, noting that such a plan still wouldn't be enough to disarm the Marquis. Surprised, Gilroshan wondered when Irgal had arrived. Irgal stepped forward and challenged him, pointing out that Gilroshan didn't even have the strength to withstand a single strike from the Marquis. Gilroshan didn't deny it. With his current strength, facing the Marquis was a losing battle, but he declared that he was about to gain true power, right here. At that moment, the system confirmed it. The Elixir of Strength, a rare potion that significantly boosts physical strength for a short duration. Irgal analyzed the situation in his mind. Gilroshan was planning to defeat not just one threat but all of them: the King of Lockman Mountains, the Revenge Priest Order, the Bear, and the Nightingale. While each opponent alone wasn't overwhelming, the Mountain King was a raid-class monster. Facing it without help seemed reckless. Yet Gilroshan reassured them. He understood they weren't strong enough on their own, but if they completed their part here, he believed someone would arrive to support them. As he approached the goblins tied to the trees, Gilroshan stared at them, his sword raised. Unlike games, these weren't just monsters. They were living beings. The weight of that truth made him uneasy. But he knew that to survive in this world, hesitation had no place. He struck down the first goblin. The system announced his level up, and Gilroshan felt an unexpected warmth bubbling inside, a strange sense of fulfillment. With 2 points from the starting bonus and 1 from reaching level 1, he now had 3 points total. Encouraged, he continued eliminating the other goblins. With each kill, the system notified him. 3 skill points spent. He had acquired the Vagabond martial arts skill. The brutal, improvised fighting style began to embed itself in his body. A bonus of 1% was applied to both strength and stamina, but Gilroshan knew this was just the beginning. To learn the sword technique necessary to challenge the Marquis, he needed to reach level 9. Right now, he was only at level 1. The road ahead was still long. After clearing out all the goblins, he received another level up and gained a few more stat points. Observing the changes, Kars commented that Gilroshan's presence had shifted noticeably. So he also noticed the difference and playfully accused him of hiding something valuable from her, teasing him about secretly obtaining a power boost. Gilroshan could feel the effects of the skill buffs coursing through his body. The enhancements were unmistakable. His physical state was already beginning to shift. He acknowledged the improvement and mentioned that he had eaten something special, a well-prepared gift from the priest order. Sui, intrigued, asked for a share, but Gilroshan casually replied that he had eaten all of it. Offended, Sui burst out in anger, scolding him for his selfishness and calling him an ungrateful brat, a rude fool, and a greedy pig. Silently, Gilroshan reminded himself that she was just 19. As the group prepared for their next move, Marco asked what they should do. Gilroshan instructed the team to drive any remaining goblin stragglers their way, but only in manageable numbers. He knew that merely dealing the final blow wasn't enough anymore. To gain proper experience, he had to engage in direct combat and develop a real sense for sword fighting. Kars soon alerted him that goblins were approaching. Gilroshan noted that only 3 or 4 would have been enough, but the number exceeded his expectations. A goblin leaped out of nowhere, launching an attack on Gilbert. Reacting quickly, Gilroshan intercepted the strike with his sword. He was surprised by the raw strength in such a small creature. Yet, thanks to the gladiator slave card, the weapon in his hand didn't feel unfamiliar. Just like in the game, subtle hit indicators guided him to time his attack perfectly. He slashed the goblin cleanly and smiled, realizing it wasn't as difficult as he had imagined. Ready for the next, he stepped forward. After the battle ended, the system announced that a new skill, Taste for Pain, had been activated. It granted a significant boost to both mental and physical recovery for the next 30 seconds. Kars then suggested they call it a day. Both the priest order and he himself were thoroughly exhausted. Gilroshan agreed. It was time to return and celebrate with what he called revolutionary solo drinks. The mention of drinks immediately lifted the spirits of Marco's entire crew. Later that night, everyone gathered around a blazing campfire. The mood was relaxed and festive, with laughter echoing through the air. Amidst the shadows, a lone figure observed them from behind a nearby tree. As he stared at Gilroshan, he struggled to understand the scene before him. The transformation was startling. Was that truly the Pig Prince Gilroshan? As the scene shifts, one of the soldiers turns to his captain and asks whether they should eliminate everyone present. The captain, deep in thought, pauses and begins assessing the situation carefully. Over the past few days, their targets hadn't bothered to hide their presence. There were no attempts at covering tracks or creating confusion. Tonight, they had even lit a fire in the open without any concealment magic and were using charcoal. Among them, only a few were drinking, and notably, the third prince of Gilison was sitting openly with them. The captain grew suspicious. This had all the signs of a trap meant to lure them in. Yet the order they had received was to eliminate the kidnappers. But the prince did not look like someone held against his will. Moreover, Sir Kar Cillian and Turbayan Sui were already by his side. From their behavior, nothing about the gathering seemed dangerous. Another soldier, sensing the hesitation, asked the captain what they were going to do. The captain firmly ordered them to stand by. They needed to evaluate the situation thoroughly before making any report. As the observing soldiers were noticed, Gilroshan immediately identified them as the Special Task Force. Kars recognized the captain and addressed him as Lord Pellet. Pellet, now face to face with the group, expressed relief at Gilroshan's safety. Gilroshan responded with a welcoming gesture. However, Pellet quickly turned to Kars, demanding an explanation. He questioned whether Kars, Sui, and even the third prince himself had betrayed the Empire. Gilroshan, taken aback, silently wondered if that wasn't far too little respect for a royal prince, regardless of reputation. Pellet repeated his question, growing more direct. Kars answered that Gilroshan would explain everything himself. But before proceeding, Kars pointed out that Pellet should first offer a proper greeting to the Prince of the Empire. Sui voiced her agreement. Gilroshan noted to himself how dependable his companions had become. Following protocol, Pellet knelt and formally introduced himself as the squad leader of the Special Task Force and deputy to the commander, presenting his respect to the Prince of the Great Vault Empire. Gilroshan accepted the gesture and allowed him to rise. Then, requesting a private word, he asked Kars and Sui to give them some space. Once alone, Gilroshan greeted Pellet and began his explanation. Over the past few days, the Vengeance Priests had made no attempt to hide or cause meaningful disruption. A man of Pellet's experience would surely have noticed how odd that was. The Priest Order's actions were not intended to delay enemies. They were deliberately misleading the rear pursuit forces. Pellet, confused, asked why the Priest Order would behave this way. Gilroshan revealed the reason. It was because he had ordered them to. He had been waiting for Pellet to arrive. Surprised, Pellet asked for the reason behind such a move and why the prince had been waiting specifically for him. Gilroshan clarified that he had never been kidnapped. His intentions were clear. He planned to travel to Aurax alongside the Vengeance Priests. To make that happen, he needed to meet with Marquis Elron Wright. Anticipating skepticism, he assured there was no madness in his words. Pellet, however, was stunned. Even for someone considered reckless, this seemed beyond the pale. He questioned whether Gilroshan was declaring his betrayal of the Empire. Gilroshan countered sharply, implying that not everything needed to be spelled out. The matter could be resolved by simply heading to the gate and speaking directly with Marquis Roy. He demanded an answer and received one. Pellet acknowledged that he was right. Gilroshan, satisfied that command and discipline had been reestablished, placed a hand on Pellet's shoulder. The night had grown late, so he suggested they leave at dawn. But before that, there was one stop he needed to make. Pellet inquired about the destination. Gilroshan explained casually that it was nothing more than hunting down a dangerous beast that had been troubling nearby citizens. However, he warned Pellet not to attack the vengeance priests under any circumstance, day or night. He reminded him of his long service under Commander Reut and hinted at a deeper understanding. Pellet was familiar with a certain secret regarding Kars's origins. Shocked, Pellet questioned how Gilroshan could know such classified information. With a calm gesture, Gilroshan placed a finger over Pellet's lips and suggested they let the night pass in peace. His tone left no room for resistance. Pellet nodded silently. As Gilroshan walked away, he instructed Pellet to return with his subordinates at dawn. Left behind, Pellet was conflicted. This was the third prince everyone whispered about in fear and disdain? Were the rumors exaggerated? Or had the prince truly lost his mind? The next morning, Gilroshan stood tall, deep in thought. He reflected on Marquis Elrond Reut's swordplay, an impressive style drawn even with a paralyzed shoulder. It was unmistakably Trafalgar swordsmanship, a legacy of the old Luxon Kingdom's knights. This style prioritized flowing movements focused on defense and follow-up attacks, and its unique feature allowed it to be used with any weapon type. He admired how this form didn't require a specific blade. In the hands of the Marquis, the sword was more than a mere tool. It was a companion. The roaring sword, the Marquis's personal weapon, wasn't just sentient. It was the proud symbol of the Reut family's leadership. The Marquis never let it out of his grasp. At that moment, the system notified Gilroshan that he had spent 4 skill points. He had now learned nomadic crushing swordsmanship and could perform basic techniques. Excited, Gilroshan couldn't hide his joy. Although the Trafalgar style was grade B and his new one only grade C, he understood the deeper dynamics. Crushing swordsmanship focused on overwhelming opponents with relentless power and weight, while flowing techniques relied on smooth transitions to expose weaknesses. In the Shinverse, crushing, quick, and flowing styles existed in a rock-paper-scissors balance. Quick attacks overpowered flowing, making the grade difference less important. Sometimes, it could even become an advantage. He found this system fascinating. The Luxon Kingdom, once a vassal of the Empire far in the west, had ruled with cruelty, enslaving nomads within its borders. But the nomads had united, nearly destroying the kingdom. Although they were ultimately defeated, their powerful sword style endured, a combat method built specifically to destroy the Luxon Knights' Trafalgar style. As Gilroshan finished processing all this, Kars approached and informed him that everyone was assembled. Gilroshan replied that he was on his way and reminded himself that although the technique was only grade C for now, its hidden potential would soon emerge. At the gathering point, Marco's team and the Special Task Force stood together, clearly not thrilled to work alongside each other. Gilroshan noticed their tension and recalled their lack of cooperation in the past. He emphasized that consistent, repeated strikes were more important than relying on a single powerful blow. However, Marco responded that he'd already heard the same thing for 10 minutes straight. Pellet also acknowledged the instruction, though half-heartedly. Gilroshan could tell none of them had truly grasped what he meant. This miscommunication wasn't part of his plan. He had hoped to leave the upcoming raid entirely to Urgal and sit it out himself, but Urgal had other plans. He insisted that Gilroshan accompany him, believing the group wouldn't listen to anyone else. Gilroshan agreed and confirmed they were on the same page. To establish authority, Gilroshan asked Kars to hit him hard, enough for everyone to hear. Kars hesitated, but Gilroshan insisted. Reluctantly, Kars delivered a solid punch to Gilroshan's face. Standing before the group, Gilroshan announced that from this moment onward, he would take direct command. He addressed both the Vengeance Priests and the Special Task Force, warning them that once they entered the mission zone, there would be no tolerance for hesitation or disobedience. Everyone was to follow his orders without question. Failure to do so would guarantee death, as their target, Gromhart, king of the Lochman Mountains, was far more dangerous than they imagined. Watching this unfold, Pellet silently recalled Gilroshan had described it as a simple pest extermination. With the final warning given, Gilroshan declared the plan complete. Without waiting, he ordered the team to move in. Gromhart was seen sleeping atop a massive pile of bones when a sudden sensation stirred him awake. He sniffed the air, recognizing a fresh scent, and realized that new prey had willingly walked into his domain. Pellet, witnessing the grim scene, was shaken. He couldn't ignore the countless bones scattered beneath Gromhart, each one a grim reminder of lives lost. The realization hit hard. Nearby villagers had likely been fed to this monster as tribute. The shame ran deep. Not only had the Empire remained ignorant while things got this dire, now they had to rely on the support of rebels to fix the situation. Rallying his team, Pellet took full responsibility. The very existence of the Special Task Force and their ignorance of it reflected their own failure. He declared that from this moment on, even if they all perished, they would avenge the fallen citizens of the Empire. The entire squad responded with determination and surged forward to engage the monster. At the same time, Marco urged his own team into action. Vengeance was not exclusive to the Empire. Lord ALM demanded retribution, and his group would claim it. With that, Marco's team and the Special Task Force united, charging Gromhart together. As the battle broke out, Gromhart responded with force. wielding his weapon with monstrous strength. Pellet dodged an incoming strike and launched himself toward the creature's eye. Yet, despite aiming for what should have been the weakest spot, his blow had no effect. Just as the third prince had warned, the eye wasn't a vulnerability. Without wasting time, Pellet ordered his team to begin slicing off the shell. The group responded swiftly, focusing their attacks on the creature's armored exterior. The fight intensified as Marco's team and the special task force moved in perfect sync, combining their efforts to land powerful, coordinated blows. Watching the scene unfold, Kars expressed his admiration to Gilroshan. Each member of the special task force demonstrated outstanding swordsmanship, matching the best in the Empire. Sui added that their agility could rival even that of the priesthood. Gilroshan acknowledged their elite training. Though they were knights, the special task force excelled in infiltration and covert operations. Still, Grumheart was currently in a weakened state. Internally, Gilroshan assessed the battle. The first phase of Grumheart was manageable, with swift and agile damage dealers, and this lineup was nearly ideal for the task. However, the real threat would emerge once Phase 2 began, when Grumheart would rise again with renewed strength. That moment was approaching fast, and Gilroshan grew uneasy. Urgel had vanished at the start of the battle, and his absence at such a critical time raised urgent concerns. Gilroshan turned to Sui, instructing her to begin preparing her magic. As he observed the ongoing battle, he grew frustrated. The enemy wasn't even being given time to analyze the fight. Sharp instincts like these were exactly what he disliked about seasoned players. Suddenly, Grumheart roared in anger, cursing the fighters as mere insects. Gilroshan immediately ordered everyone to retreat. Sui activated her magic power and launched a fireball at the monster. But the attack had no effect. In the next moment, her body froze, refusing to move. Panic settled in as she realized she was immobilized. Despite the setback, Marco's team and the special task force regrouped quickly and resumed their assault on Grumheart. Watching them push forward, Gilroshan quietly acknowledged their efforts. Everyone was doing well, but the situation had entered a critical phase. Phase 2 of Grumheart's transformation brought high resistance to physical damage and powerful natural healing. Swords alone were now ineffective, as the monster's recovery was far too rapid. This triggered a memory from the past. During a strategy session, Marco had expressed disbelief that sword attacks wouldn't work and suggested using Sword Spirit as an alternative. Gilroshan had explained that while imbuing swords with magic might help slightly, the results would be inefficient. Instead, he had emphasized that elemental magic attacks were far more effective. Unlike sword strikes, magic couldn't be healed away. The plan had centered around Sui, the 7-star witch. She would use fire-based magic to blast Grumheart, but that tactic came with a risk. Once the monster sensed her spellcasting, it would charge straight at her. The solution was simple. The others would take turns distracting the beast until she finished her cast. Gilroshan had advised conserving magic power not for enhancing blades, but for speed and movement. With that strategy laid out, he had reassured the group that their victory depended on coordination, not raw power. Back in the present, the battle raged on. Grumheart swung fiercely while warriors surrounded him from all sides. One of Marco's soldiers stepped forward and drove his sword into the beast, declaring it a strike of revolution on behalf of the Empire's knights. As the dust settled momentarily, Sui turned to Gilroshan for guidance. The fire magic was ready, but if she cast it now, the blast radius would engulf allies along with the target. The timing had to be perfect. A wave of panic swept over Gilroshan's thoughts. He couldn't understand what had triggered the sudden chaos. Everything had been progressing smoothly just moments ago. Now the battlefield was in disarray. No magic attacks were landing effectively, and with Phase 3 approaching fast, the danger level was rapidly escalating. Realizing the urgency, Gilroshan shouted to Pellet and Marco, demanding immediate action. The situation had shifted. This wasn't like before. Without a proper hit-and-run strategy, the entire force risked complete annihilation. Marco, refusing to back down, instead ordered his team to fall back. He declared confidently that the priesthood should now understand they couldn't stand against the overwhelming might of the revolutionary sword. Pellet echoed the sentiment, asserting that their enemies were no match in swordsmanship, and called for a retreat as well. Frustrated, Gilroshan tried to stop them from provoking each other. Their internal rivalry was only feeding the chaos, and amidst the shouting, Grumheart struck down a soldier, slamming him hard into the rocks. Another fighter launched an aerial attack, recognizing the sword in Grumheart's grasp as one belonging to a revolutionary. But before he could land a decisive blow, Grumheart grabbed him midair and hurled him away, crashing him violently into a boulder. Watching it unfold, Gilroshan's mind raced. He knew too well how full-powered boss raids worked. For seasoned players, even easy patterns demanded constant focus. The key was never to let one's guard down until the enemy was truly defeated. One misstep, and the boss would seize control, leading to a full team wipe. Ironically, the warriors here weren't gamers. They had grown overconfident far too soon, believing the worst had passed. Gilroshan had made the same mistake. But this wasn't just about them anymore. If the situation reached Phase 3, not only would they fall, he would too. A storm of thoughts raced through Gilroshan's mind. He couldn't afford to lose focus now. He had to find a way through this chaos, even if he couldn't look away for a second. Just then, Kars approached and placed a steadying hand on Gilroshan's shoulder. With calm reassurance, he reminded him that his sword and shield still stood by his side. The elite Special Operations Knights and the Avenger Priests were also present, the best warriors of the Empire and the Revolution alike. These soldiers had faced death countless times and survived. Kars acknowledged Gilroshan's return to his old self, but sensed he was carrying too much responsibility alone. If ever that burden became too much, Kars gently offered to share it. But Gilroshan, hearing those words, felt a chill. Thoughts of a looming death flag crossed his mind. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Pellet rushed to the side of a wounded warrior, asking if he was all right. The soldier affirmed he was still standing. Pellet grabbed his hand and helped him up, urging him to hold on just a bit longer. Yet the grim reality settled in Pellet's thoughts. The third prince's strategy was built on two key goals: drawing Grumhart's attention away from Sui and holding the beast in place long enough for magic to land a clean hit. Though they had managed to draw the monster's gaze again, the mounting number of injured made it increasingly difficult to restrain him. The remaining fighters were exhausting rapidly. But someone had to bear the burden, for the Empire, and for those who had already fallen. With renewed resolve, Pellet dashed forward and struck at Grumhart, shouting to Sui that it was now or never. Without hesitation, Sui unleashed her fire magic from behind, launching a blazing assault straight at the monster. Pellet, seeing the flames hit their mark, acknowledged her perfect timing. But his relief didn't last long. Grumhart, undeterred, charged at him. The beast had locked onto him, not Sui. Pellet realized it was already too late to dodge. Bracing for impact, he lifted his sword to block the attack, struggling under the overwhelming force. In that moment, Pellet's thoughts turned solemn. If this was the end, he accepted it with honor, having served his captain to the very last. But just before the blow could land, Marco surged in and shielded Pellet from the fatal strike. He dismissed any thanks, instead pointing out that Pellet had drawn far too much attention. Now that the monster's eyes were locked on him, Marco proposed they fight together to cover for the ones who had fallen. Pellet gave a nod of agreement. The battle wasn't over yet. Together, they would raise hell. As the battle raged on, Sui unleashed another powerful fire attack directly at Grumhart. Watching the flames engulf the monster, Gilroshan felt a surge of hope. The attack had landed cleanly. He was amazed that Pellet and Vamilo had managed to create this opening. Sui, standing firm in her conviction, declared this moment as a demonstration of true magic for her disciple to witness. Gilroshan assessed the situation carefully. They had officially entered Phase 3 of the fight. Thanks to the earlier crisis, everyone seemed more alert. Both the knights and priests were performing impressively without guidance. In this phase, Grumhart had lost his physical resistance and ability to regenerate health. In return, his attack power grew stronger the closer he was to death. Now, the beast had completely abandoned defense and focused only on aggressive offense. But that also meant one thing. The monster would now target the weakest among his enemies. Unfortunately, that target was Gilroshan, the one with the lowest level. At that moment, a system alert confirmed it. Grumhart's demon eye had locked onto him. Gilroshan quickly warned everyone to prepare, knowing what was coming. Meanwhile, Grumhart's fury exploded. The monster roared in rage, declaring his intention to devour each enemy one by one. Just then, out of nowhere, a massive boulder came crashing down onto Grumhart. Urgal had hurled it with perfect timing. Gilroshan, stunned by what he saw, couldn't believe such a move was even possible. Urgal stood triumphantly atop the boulder, silent and composed. Witnessing the scene, one soldier asked if they had truly defeated the monster. Another confirmed it joyfully. The entire battlefield erupted in celebration. Marco turned to Pellet, acknowledging his efforts. Pellet humbly thanked him. Yet Gilroshan's thoughts were unsettled. He questioned whether this tactic was even possible in the game world known as the God-forsaken world. The use of stalactites shouldn't have worked. In the original version of Shinbios' design, the ceiling of this area was completely out of sight, meaning dropping such a rock was not an intended strategy. Something didn't add up. Turning toward Urgal, Gilroshan demanded to know who he truly was. Urgal played coy, pretending not to understand. Gilroshan repeated the question. He wanted a direct answer. Inside, Gilroshan resolved to lay all his cards on the table. There was no more room for uncertainty. Urgal responded cryptically, suggesting that if Gilroshan were a player, then he likely already knew the truth. He hinted that the answer should be obvious. That was when Gilroshan came to a sobering realization. At least one thing about Urgal had become absolutely clear. That man, without a doubt, was unbelievably petty. After Grumhart's defeat, the group entered his treasure vault. Pellet looked around and questioned the emptiness of the space. In response, Gilroshan pointed out something others had overlooked. Pellet soon realized he was referring to the alcohol. At that moment, a voice called out from the shadows. A prisoner hiding within the vault confirmed Grumhart's death and encouraged everyone in hiding to come out. One of the prisoners, upon spotting Marco, recognized him immediately. He cried out, calling Marco the god Ulem, and believed they were saved at last. Marco calmly clarified that he was not a god, but merely a servant of the Grand Church of Ulem. He explained that he had come to rescue them by the will of Ulem. Before tensions could rise, Pellet stepped forward and introduced their group as the Imperial Special Task Force, stating their mission to rescue the captives. But the atmosphere quickly shifted. One of the men stepped forward, his voice filled with grief and rage. He recalled how he had assured his son that the Empire would save them, but now it was too late. His son had already been devoured by the monster. He accused the rescuers of arriving too late, claiming that no words or pride could ever ease that kind of pain. For him, it was too much to bear. He rejected their help completely. More voices joined him, echoing his fury. The rescued villagers turned hostile, telling the special task force to leave. They declared they would rather die than accept help from the ones who failed to protect them. Watching the rising anger, one of Pellet's companions suggested retreating for the time being. But Pellet, overwhelmed with emotion, broke into tears and apologized with sincerity. Gilroshan stepped in to explain. He stated that the monsters in the Lockman Mountains had only recently begun roaming freely. It was extremely rare for mountain monsters to raid a village and abduct all its residents. Even the special task force would have found it difficult to detect such an incident in time. He explained that his joining the task force had been a coincidence through his meeting with the Vengeance Priests. Together, they had subdued Grumheart. He promised to meet with the commander of the task force and issue orders to clear out the remaining mountain monsters and repair the damage. Though no words could undo the pain, he offered the Empire's deepest apologies for all they had suffered. The villagers, taken aback, asked who he was. Gilroshan introduced himself, Gilroshan Elodabalt, third prince of the Empire. His words sparked whispers among the villagers. Many of them had only heard rumors that the third prince was a drunken troublemaker, but here he was, bowing before ordinary people. The presence of the prince himself made them wonder if the Empire truly cared. And when they reflected on it, they realized the real villain had been the monster all along. One man approached the grieving father. He too had lost loved ones, his wife in the recent attack, and a child to famine years earlier. He asked himself whether dying alongside them would truly bring peace. In the end, he concluded that despite the sadness, the living must carry on. He planned to gather joyful memories and live in a way that would let him share stories with the ones he had lost. He encouraged the grieving father to do the same, to live in his own way, for the sake of those who were gone. Gilroshan stood in silent thought. Defeating Grumheart offered little reward. The demon never sought gold or jewels, only human lives. His raids weren't about conquest, but preparation for something greater. The true prize was the elixir hidden in the demon's eye. Saving people had been a secondary goal, a byproduct. As the weight of this reality settled, Gilroshan questioned the world he lived in, and more deeply, who he truly was. A man stepped forward, humbly asking the prince to raise his head. He admitted that Gilroshan wasn't like the high nobles he had imagined. There was something different, something human. With tears in his eyes, the man made a simple request. His son Holt had been a mere commoner. All he asked was that Gilroshan remember his name. The prince nodded, promising silently that he would never forget. Elsewhere, Kar's father, Marquis Elon, confronted Lieutenant Pellet. He couldn't believe Pellet had abandoned the elite rebel troops in the forest simply because the third prince had changed. Pellet confirmed it, explaining that this was his first time meeting the prince in person, and he was nothing like the rumors. Among the rescued refugees, there was even talk that the prince should become the next emperor. Overwhelmed by what he called nonsense, the Marquis ordered Pellet to focus on managing the refugees. He decided he would see the truth for himself. Back in the tent, Kars faced Gilroshan and questioned whether he had been hiding because of the situation. Gilroshan reminded him that his mission was to stay by the prince's side and protect him, as any royal guard should. But Kars, feeling useless, apologized for his failure. Gilroshan simply asked for warm tea. His shoulders felt heavy. Just then, Marquis Elon entered the tent. Gilroshan greeted him, noting how long they had waited despite being told it would be a brief chat. The Marquis explained that the lieutenant had shared some unexpected things. He turned to Kars, asking if anything was wrong. Kars assured him everything was fine. Shifting to the main topic, the Marquis asked about Gilroshan's intention to travel to Orax. The prince acknowledged his concern but declared his decision. To change, he must go to Orax, and if anyone tried to stop him, he would press forward regardless. The Marquis was stunned by the prince's bold words. In disbelief, he thought to himself how reckless they sounded. Composing himself, he warned that the joke had gone too far. He reminded the prince that he was a swordmaster, one of only 3 in the Empire to attain the rank of 9 stars. The prince could never hope to defeat him. For the safety of the Empire, he couldn't allow this journey to continue. Instead, he planned to send Gilroshan back to the capital and eliminate the rebels hiding in the forest. But Gilroshan, standing firm, issued a formal challenge. As Gilithan of House Balt, he challenged Elon, head of House Loit, to a noble duel. He invited the Marquis to step outside and fight. He even provoked him further, asking if he feared defeat due to his injured shoulder. The Marquis was caught off guard. He didn't know how the prince had discovered his old injury, but if Gilroshan intended to provoke him, it had worked. Elon of House Loit accepted the duel. The Marquis stood firm before Gilroshan, asking what rules they should follow for the duel. Gilroshan, silently observing, sensed no hesitation in the man's voice. It was the voice of someone confident in an unquestionable victory. Kars then stepped forward to declare the rules. First, only pure swordsmanship would be allowed, no mana use. Second, no armor would be worn. And third, dropping the sword would mean immediate defeat. Marcus Roy accepted without objection. At that moment, the system announced a sudden event. Noble Duel activated. Gilroshan would have to defeat Elon Roy to claim victory. Crowds gathered quickly, their whispers loud and biting. They couldn't believe the third prince was dueling a Swordmaster commander. Many mocked him, calling him insane, weak, and a disgrace to royalty. Among them, Pellet stood silently, watching everything unfold. The Marquis, surprised by Gilroshan's composure, admitted the prince seemed prepared and had chosen rules that weren't even in his favor. He recalled Pellet claiming that the prince had changed, though he remained skeptical. Reputation, he said, was forged through past actions, and the murmurs in the crowd were proof. Changing that perception wouldn't be easy. He then questioned how the prince knew about his injured shoulder and hidden past. Gilroshan responded bluntly, dismissing the lecture. He hadn't come for idle talk. He had come to defeat the Marquis, go to Aurax, and build a new future for himself and his allies. That, he believed, was a better outcome than letting cars waste away at drinking parties. In his mind, Gilroshan understood that changing himself was one thing, but changing public perception of the degenerate prince was another. However, if he could do it through overwhelming power, the people might quickly flip their opinions, even believing he had only pretended to be a fool all along. Gilroshan signaled his readiness to fight. He accused the Marquis of hiding behind words and invited him to prove his worth in action, not talk. The Marquis was stunned. To hear the word qualifications from Gilroshan, who had ruined his son's future, was infuriating. The prince now dared to say that taking cars into danger was better than indulging in drinks? Furious, he drew his sword. In his thoughts, if Gilroshan wasn't worthy of being Kars' lord, then he wouldn't just be stopped. He wouldn't leave this place in one piece. As the duel began, Gilroshan noticed the slow, deliberate approach of the Marquis. It was unsettling. He questioned if he had provoked him too much, but quickly refocused. The fight had started. Dodging narrowly, Gilroshan realized the strikes looked slow, but each one was heavy and pinpointed. He was overwhelmed by the relentless chain of attacks, too busy blocking to counterattack. The spectators gasped, praising the commander's dominance while noting the prince's surprising defense. The Marquis pressed on, mocking Gilroshan for bragging earlier. Gilroshan knew he had to strike the hit points, but the unending combos made it impossible to activate the special effects of his nomadic quickblade style. He was trapped and needed a solution. The Marquis continued to taunt, demanding if Gilroshan even remembered who he was fighting. With a fierce attack, he landed a powerful kick to the prince's stomach, sending him flying across the field. Gilroshan struggled to rise. He wanted to get up but couldn't move. As the Marquis approached, he suddenly turned and walked away. Kars rushed to Gilroshan's side, asking if he was all right. Gilroshan asked if he had lost, but Kars reminded him he hadn't dropped his sword yet. The duel wasn't over. Gilroshan was confused about why the Marquis walked away. Kars explained that an honorable knight would never strike a downed opponent during a duel, and the crowd had gotten too close. The Marquis had simply returned to the center. But more importantly, he asked Gilroshan if he could continue. Gilroshan affirmed with determination he would win. Kars respected his will and pledged to trust him. Before the prince returned to the fight, Kars gave one last piece of advice. The Trafalgar sword style was visually stunning and well-chained, but slower than Gilroshan's quickblade. However, if the chain began, the user would be overwhelmed. The key was to break the chain before it started. Focus was everything, and most importantly, avoid injury. Gilroshan nodded, promising to return victorious. Reflecting on the advice, he understood. Victory required disrupting the chain early. The visible hit points gave him clues to anticipate the attacks, an advantage others in this world didn't have. But fear had held him back. The line between game mechanics and real combat had shaken his focus. Suddenly, a child from the crowd shouted encouragement, telling the prince not to give up. Hearing this, others joined in, cheering for Gilroshan. Embarrassed but touched, Gilroshan muttered that such loud cheering wasn't necessary. Still, he smiled. He might not fully understand this world, but he knew he could navigate it better than anyone. The Marquis called out, asking if he was ready. With a calm smile, Gilroshan replied that he had been ready all along, just nervous before. In his mind, the plan was made. Now, it was time to execute it. The Marquis acknowledged that, in a way, it was impressive how Gilroshan still had the luxury to bluff so confidently. Gilroshan accepted that, from the Marquis' point of view, his actions must seem like nothing more than bravado. Internally, Gilroshan recalled the hidden secret of nomadic swift swordsmanship. The technique evolved specifically when used to counter the Trafalgar fencing style used by the Marquis. The condition required striking the opponent's hit points 3 times in a row. In game mechanics, it was called stacking 3 stacks. Everything that had happened so far had been preparation. Now, the real fight against Elron was about to begin. Determined, Gilroshan stepped forward and launched his next attack. The Marquis noticed something unusual. The vivid red eyes of the Vault Imperial family gleamed with a sharp intensity. Though he had encountered the third prince before, this was the first time he saw that look in his eyes. Gilroshan advanced and slashed toward the Marquis. The Marquis met the attack with his own blade, acknowledging that Gilroshan's form had improved. Without pause, Gilroshan swung again. The Marquis blocked it and countered with a heavy strike, which Gilroshan narrowly dodged. The prince noted that his opponent was terrifying. Yet this offensive stance was far better than just defending. Charging forward once more, Gilroshan locked his eyes on the Marquis's hit point and struck with precision. A clean hit. His first stack was in place. The Marquis, caught off guard, reflected that such a strike was beyond what the third prince should be capable of. He wondered if it had simply been luck, but he needed confirmation. Suddenly, the Marquis lunged forward with alarming speed. Gilroshan, surprised by the sudden movement, quickly regained focus. There was no room for panic. He continued targeting the hit points, landing another strike, 2 stacks down, just 1 more to go. From his current position, the Marquis wouldn't be able to parry it. The Marquis attacked again. Gilroshan blocked the blow with perfect timing. The Marquis was stunned. Even highly skilled warriors struggled against that move. A moment too slow or a slight misalignment, and Gilroshan could have lost an arm. And now, he noticed, the prince was smiling. At that moment, time itself seemed to stop. The entire crowd froze in place, motionless and silent. Standing in the stillness, Gilroshan, stunned by his own success, finally said what he had been holding in. He had actually pulled it off. He had landed his strikes against that sword-obsessed lunatic. Just as the clash reached its peak, the system announced that the hidden evolution condition for the Nomad Quickblade technique had been fulfilled. What was once a C-rank skill had now evolved into the S-rank technique, Heiwu sword style. Gilroshan recognized the legacy behind the name. The Heiwu sword style was created by nomads from the eastern continent. In the Shinverse, Eastern-style wuxia skills were exceptionally rare. This was more than an upgrade, it was a stroke of incredible luck. The system prompted him to select one of 3 bonus effects for the newly awakened skill: Sweeping Army, Transplanted Blossom, and Vajra Wall. Without hesitation, Gilroshan chose Transplanted Blossom. He understood its meaning deeply. The concept behind Transplanted Blossom was to graft strength from the enemy and use it against them, like transferring a flower from one tree onto another. The strength elixir he had consumed earlier was wearing off, and the evolved skill alone wouldn't be enough to defeat Elron Loit. But with Elron's monstrous power as a 9-star knight and the sheer weight of his greatsword, Roaring Blade, Gilroshan knew he had a temporary chance. If he could reflect all of that force with the remaining effect of his strength potion, he might even disarm the swordmaster, as long as magic wasn't involved. However, the clock was ticking, and Elron wasn't taking him seriously yet. To provoke that monstrous strength, Gilroshan had to push him into a real fight. The system confirmed the game's resumption. Without wasting a moment, Gilroshan struck the Marquis's blade aside and advanced with renewed speed. Kars, watching intently, noticed something had changed. His Highness's sword had suddenly gotten faster. Another spectator commented in disbelief that even a one-handed sword shouldn't move that swiftly unless fueled by absurd strength. Doubts began to form. Could the commander actually lose? Kars snapped back in anger, refusing to accept such talk. He reminded everyone that the commander hadn't even taken a stance yet. He was a swordmaster, one of the Empire's deadliest blades. The other man backed off, telling Kars to calm down. Meanwhile, locked in combat, the Marquis expressed intrigue. Gilroshan not only knew about his shoulder weakness, but had also mastered the Eastern sword technique designed to counter Trafalgar fencing. Sir Pellet's judgment that Gilroshan was different from the rumors had been correct. Still, no matter how much the prince had changed, or even if he had been reborn, the Marquis declared he could not be allowed to travel to Orax with Kars. Gilroshan assessed the situation. Elron was still calm. This wasn't enough. The strength potion's effect was nearly over, and there wasn't enough time to push Elron into serious mode. He had no choice. He had to strike where it hurt. He provoked him with a direct statement, questioning whether it bothered Elron so much that he was taking Kars along. Gilroshan declared that Kars was as dear to him as a brother. Having grown up with him, he believed his bond with Kars was deeper than Elron's. He reminded Elron that Kars wanted to go to Orax with him, so why oppose it? He challenged Elron's right to act like a father. Yet the response wasn't what he expected. Gilroshan reflected that in the original story, Elron Loit was the model of a principled and patriotic knight. When someone spoke about Kars without enough emotional closeness, it usually triggered a rage response. Gilroshan expected that reaction now. But Elron remained composed. He began to wonder, had Elron Loit already developed maximum emotional intimacy with Gilroshan? Finally, the Marquis snapped. He questioned what Gilroshan knew to talk that way. He admitted he was holding back only because Kars was watching. But if Gilroshan lost today, he wouldn't be allowed to walk away alive. Gilroshan yelled back, furious at the insult. Though this was a duel, he was still a prince, and the Marquis should be careful. Did he think the Emperor would remain silent if harm came to him? As Elron advanced to strike, his voice turned cold. If the Emperor truly cared, would Gilroshan have ever been kidnapped? He acknowledged Gilroshan's skill, but reminded him that a fast sword meant nothing without experience. Between them stood an overwhelming gulf carved by years of combat. The Marquis delivered his final warning. This was farewell for the third prince. Gilroshan struck the Marquis's sword with precision, disarming him completely. The blade slipped from Elron's hand and clattered to the ground. The crowd fell silent, stunned by what they had just witnessed. Kars immediately declared the victor. Gilroshan had won. A wave of relief and excitement spread through the onlookers. Some broke into quiet celebration. Sui, watching from nearby, smiled with pride and praised Gilroshan's performance. At that moment, the system announced that the enhancement effect from the elixir of strength had officially ended. Meanwhile, the Marquis stood frozen in disbelief. He tried to process the last few moments. That final movement by Gilroshan, it hadn't been luck. He moved as if he had seen the future, perfectly predicting the Marquis's attack. Even the smile Gilroshan had worn during the maneuver, it was all part of a plan, every step calculated. Extending a hand toward the Marquis, Gilroshan reminded him of the outcome. He had won. But Elrond gave no response. Gilroshan pressed further, asking if he was refusing to accept defeat, clarifying that all his earlier taunts were only meant to provoke him. Elrond remained silent, lost in thought. He recalled Pellet's words and silently admitted the truth. The third prince had truly changed. Without a word, the Marquis slowly dropped to one knee. Gilroshan, caught off guard, questioned what he was doing. With solemn respect, Elrond acknowledged his defeat. As the head of House Loit, he declared it an honor to cross swords with the prince and to be bested by him. He bowed with gratitude. The system immediately registered the outcome. Sudden event, noble duel had ended. Gilroshan had officially defeated Marquis Loit. Despite the declaration, unrest stirred among the Marquis's soldiers. Some began to shout in protest. They questioned the validity of the duel, claiming something had felt off from the beginning. One shouted that the magic restrictions never made sense, declaring the entire match invalid. Tension built, but before chaos could erupt, the Marquis rose with his sword in hand and addressed his troops. He reminded them that the duel had been fair. The terms were set by the prince and he had willingly agreed. He admitted he was the one who dropped his sword while Gilroshan still held his. He challenged his knights. Were they truly ready to become the kind of soldiers who refused to accept their commander's defeat? The angry murmurs fell silent. The knights lowered their heads, acknowledging his words. None of them wanted to be that kind of knight. Gilroshan reflected on the battle, realizing he couldn't have asked for a more reliable ally. Earlier, fear had crept into his thoughts. Without the set terms, Elrond could have shattered his sword barehanded. Now it seemed Elrond finally recognized him as Kars's liege. The overwhelming difference in experience wasn't an exaggeration. Even though it was just a game world, Gilroshan had lost to Elrond countless times before. Suddenly, Sui appeared behind him and embraced him proudly, praising him for his glorious performance. Kars rushed in, checking if Gilroshan was injured anywhere besides his left arm. Sui, filled with excitement, claimed this victory brought her one step closer to becoming Tower Master. Gilroshan teased Kars, warning that staying close to the master might bring him suffering. Interrupting the moment, Marquis Elrond approached respectfully, requesting a moment of Gilroshan's time. In private, Elrond explained that he had already instructed his adjutant, Pellet, to bring the clerics from the forest, assuring their safety with his own honor. He acknowledged Gilroshan's victory and promised not to stand in his way. However, he had 3 important questions. Gilroshan gave him permission to proceed. Elrond began by reminding him of his position as the nation's knight commander. Even though there was currently a ceasefire, Orax was still enemy territory. He asked what Gilroshan intended to do there. Elrond recalled his own covert mission in Orax during his youth and warned of its dangers. Gilroshan assured him he knew enough about Orax. When questioned further, he described the city as the complete opposite of the imperial capital, Kertion. Orax was chaotic, filled with pickpockets and dangerous goods sold openly in markets. In its black markets, even life and death were traded. Despite the madness, it remained a place where people lived. Elrond pointed out that Gilroshan held no authority in Orax. Gilroshan clarified that he was simply familiar with it and asked if he should explain further. He began describing the 6 armed factions, including 2 churches, all revolving around the leader of the revolutionary army. Alarmed, Elrond stopped him, insisting the name shouldn't be spoken lightly. Gilroshan understood the weight of that name. Within the Empire, even saying it aloud was a serious crime. Still, he reassured Elrond not to worry about his safety. His journey was well planned, and he wasn't going to join the revolutionary army. If that were the case, he would have gone alone. Orax simply held a unique opportunity, a chance so powerful, even a prince with nothing could turn the world upside down. Hearing this, Elrond asked if he meant the nest of the Death Dragon. Gilroshan confirmed it. His intention was to command a dragon. In the Blue Mountain Range near Orax lay a dungeon called the Lair of the Dead Dragon, a forbidden labyrinth where dragons abandoned their eggs. Other races were strictly prohibited from entering. However, those who passed a special quest could gain the right to command a dragon. Elrond, concerned, asked him to reconsider. The odds were slim and the risk too great. But Gilroshan reminded him that defeating the Marquis itself defied logic. Whether going to Orax or venturing into the lair of the 4 dragons, it was all part of the path he had chosen. He urged Elrond not to worry and requested the second question. Elrond hesitated before asking what he should report to the Emperor once Gilroshan entered Orax. He couldn't tell the truth to His Majesty. Gilroshan hadn't considered the Emperor yet. Barsan Carla de Vault, the 44th Emperor of the Vault Magic Empire. A terrifying blend of cruelty, genius, and power, he was both Gilroshan's father and one of the strongest beings in the human world. A monstrous emperor and an unpredictable danger. After a moment of thought, Gilroshan asked Elrond to tell the Emperor he had become a prophet. Elrond reacted with disbelief, referencing the infamous prophet syndrome. The system confirmed it as a condition where certain individuals gained the ability to see the future after enduring special trauma. Though they didn't learn magic, prophets paid a steep price, both mentally and physically, eventually dying from the toll. Gilroshan refused to confirm or deny it. Deep down, he had been using this as his cover for some time. It fit perfectly with his use of secret knowledge no one else should have. To make the story more convincing, Gilroshan added that Elrond should report he had gone to steal the Tears of Dawn, an imperial artifact currently held by the revolutionary leader. The Emperor would surely recognize the item, and given it was his own son, he might choose to overlook it for now. Gilroshan then asked for the final question. Elrond's last words were more of a request. He asked if Gilroshan could stay the night, to eat, rest, receive treatment, and prepare for the journey ahead. Gilroshan agreed. That night, everyone enjoyed themselves, sharing a moment of peace before the storm. The following morning, as Gilroshan prepared to depart, he noticed Pellet and Marco standing oddly, causing him to wonder what was wrong with them. Kars admitted he was nervous. Sui echoed the sentiment, expressing her doubt, unsure if this was truly the right path. Elrond, now resolved, wished Gilroshan a safe journey. Though he didn't know the prince well, he was now curious about the kind of person Gilroshan truly was, and he placed his trust in him. With that, Gilroshan responded with confidence, accepting the responsibility. Then, with purpose in his stride, he announced the start of their journey to Aurochs. The group finally arrived at Aurochs. Marco turned to Gilroshan and confirmed their arrival. At that moment, the system notified that the quest Crisis Escape had been completed. Gilroshan recalled the moment he first entered this world. The quest involving his survival and escape from the Vault Magical Empire's territory hadn't existed in the original game. He wondered what kind of reward the system would grant for such a unique task. The system then displayed the reward details. Gilroshan noted the guaranteed draw ticket. Though it was a D-grade item, he considered it quite generous for an early-stage scenario. With his current level at 9, he knew that the second card draw would unlock upon reaching level 10. The exact card he'd receive remained uncertain, but even a D-grade card would offer an advantage. Extra cards could be used to gain experience by grinding them. He set his sights on the F-grade Slave Gladiator card, already planning to use it for grinding. Silently, he offered a prayer to the Great Mage, hoping for one more stroke of luck. But before he could take another step, a group of soldiers appeared ahead and demanded their immediate arrest. Caught off guard, Gilroshan identified them as the Titan Special Ops Team. He quickly turned to Kars and Sui, reminding them of his earlier instructions. A flashback revealed Gilroshan's warning before they had departed. No matter what happened upon arrival, they were not to make any rash moves. Combat was strictly forbidden. This wasn't the Vault Magical Empire, and in a place like Aurochs, there would be no noble authority to protect them. Aurochs was a lawless city, a nest of outlaws crying for revolution. Back in the present, Gilroshan, now bound, sighed in frustration. He was growing tired of constantly being restrained. Marco approached him and acknowledged that choosing not to resist had been wise. He mocked the idea of Gilroshan, Vault's third prince, being chosen as Lord Aeolum's apostle. According to Marco, it was a foolish trick, unworthy of belief. He warned Gilroshan not to attempt deceiving the archbishop. Sui, unable to contain her fury, shouted at Marco, condemning him for betraying them and treating them so cruelly. Inside an office in Aurochs, a woman greeted Gilroshan, welcoming him to the city. Gilroshan, still bound in restraints, responded with sarcasm. He questioned the violent treatment, especially since he had returned the attackers unharmed and without retaliation. He wondered if this was truly the way of Aeolum's teachings. In his thoughts, Gilroshan assessed the situation. He suspected they were playing mind games. Knowing that Yahello was a capable assassin, he figured that after the prolonged clash with the Marquis, a report about him had definitely been sent, either by messenger bird or other means. That gave them enough time to plan a response. The woman before him was revealed to be Archbishop Hendel of the Aeolum Grand Church. Once nearly a 9-star level warrior, she had stepped down from frontline duty after sustaining grave injuries. Despite her calm and benevolent appearance, she was known for her calculated and commanding nature. As a leader of the revolutionary faction, she harbored deep resentment toward the Vault Magical Empire, the very force that had taken her arm. Gilroshan believed she intended to use him as a tool to inflict damage on her enemies. Her silence, he suspected, was just a tactic to pressure him into speaking. Accepting this, Gilroshan admitted to impersonating their god. But the Archbishop dismissed his confession, saying it wouldn't change anything now. Gilroshan then brought up the Minister of Palace Affairs from the Vault Magical Empire, who had been secretly communicating with her, and was likely enraged. He pointed out that if he were in the minister's place, he'd also be terrified of being exposed. Hendel acknowledged that his awareness of such secrets was impressive, but Gilroshan wasn't interested in the political games. He mentioned the duel with Marquis Elrond Loit and reminded her of what it felt like to face a swordmaster. Though he had emerged victorious, he knew the Archbishop would understand the gravity of such a fight. The Archbishop remained composed, internally reminding herself to stay calm and in control. Gilroshan then challenged her. If she truly wanted to kill him, she could, but he warned her that she would deeply regret it. He claimed that within 10 days, a disaster would strike Aurochs, one so devastating that countless lives would be lost and the entire city would be plunged into sorrow. The Archbishop questioned what kind of disaster he meant. Wondering if he referred to an earthquake, She believed that with the grand churches and cathedrals allowing divine manifestations, most disasters could be countered through divine power. Gilroshan argued that divine power wasn't absolute, and as Archbishop, she should know that better than anyone. He demanded that they talk properly after untying him, saying it was the natural and reasonable thing to do. Agreeing with the sentiment of order, the Archbishop responded coldly. She struck her hand on the table and commanded the guards to take the third prince to the underground prison. Without another word, she walked away. Gilroshan, surprised, muttered to himself that this wasn't how it was supposed to go. Moments later, Gilroshan was brought into a dim prison chamber. Kars immediately asked if the talks had gone well. Gilroshan didn't answer. He just offered a small smile before falling into quiet disappointment. Kars then informed him that High Priest Marco had visited and even brought food. Sui added that Marco had roughly explained the current situation in Orax. Gilroshan assumed they'd been told about the factional conflicts. Sui, surprised, asked how he already knew. Kars clarified that Marco had said the Kishira's Cathedral and the Titan Special Ops team were currently holding the Eolim Church faction in check. Gilroshan, curious, asked how that was happening. Kars explained that because Gilroshan was seen as a hostile element, many within the city wanted him either exiled or executed. Gilroshan reflected on the internal structure of the Revolutionary Army. 6 distinct armed groups made up the faction. First was the Eolim Church, represented by a snake symbol, the group they were currently dealing with. Opposing them stood the Kishira's Cathedral, marked with a fox symbol. Then came the border guards, overseeing the outskirts, and the Lie guards, protecting the occupied zones. Additionally, the First Corps functioned as reserve forces, and lastly, the Titan Special Ops team operated directly under the Commander-in-Chief. Together, they formed a vast army with specific roles and varying strengths. However, the Supreme Leader, the Commander-in-Chief, comparable in authority to the Vault Magical Empire's Emperor, was absent. Because of this, disagreements on how to handle Gilroshan had likely emerged. Gilroshan then asked if Marco had said anything else. Kars hesitated, admitting that he had withheld a message to avoid upsetting Gilroshan. Marco had reportedly said there were many people just as clever as the prince and that Gilroshan should stop acting so high and mighty. That attitude, according to Marco, was the reason he had hit rock bottom and now sat trapped in a basement. Sui awkwardly added that she didn't have a response at the time. It wasn't that she agreed, it was just that she didn't know what to say. Noticing Gilroshan's silence, Kars grew concerned and asked if he was all right. Sui panicked, urging Gilroshan to pull himself together. She swore that when she saw Vamilo again, she would confront him directly. Gilroshan reassured them that he was fine. His smile wasn't because of Marco's words. In his thoughts, he realized what Marco's message actually meant. It was a hidden cue: escape through the underground. With his mindset, Gilroshan turned to Sui and requested her to lift her foot for a moment. The three of them soon discovered a hidden underground path. Gilroshan examined it and noted that it didn't seem very deep, then suggested they descend. Kars looked puzzled, wondering why he was being singled out. Gilroshan pointed out the risk of unexpected danger. Kars dismissed the concern, insisting it was just a hole, though he confessed his hatred for spiders. Gilroshan was surprised by this side of Kars. Then Sui questioned why he was looking at her, hinting that it was unfair to expect an old teacher like her to go first after coming this far. Gilroshan thought to himself how different all of this was from the game he remembered. Without more delay, the three of them jumped into the passage together. They landed at the bottom, with Gilroshan falling first, breaking the fall for Kars and Sui, who landed on top of him. Waiting below were Archbishop Hendel and High Priest Marco. The Archbishop remarked that, just as Marco predicted, they arrived quickly. Gilroshan questioned the need for such a dramatic reunion. The Archbishop responded that he should already know the reason. Gilroshan silently admitted that he did. Even if Marco liked him, he wasn't someone who would help a prisoner escape out of pure emotion. Other factions were keeping an eye on how Archbishop Hendel handled things, so a bit of theatrics was necessary. The Archbishop explained that, officially, she never came to this place, but she had chosen to trust him. A system message appeared, indicating that a quest titled, "You're the Escapee, I'm the Archbishop," had been triggered. Gilroshan realized that in the original game, this quest only appeared if the player had a close bond with the Archbishop. Yet here it was, unfolding before him. Gilroshan questioned why she would trust him, even though he had impersonated her god and was branded a threat. The Archbishop revealed that the catastrophe Gilroshan had warned about was something their church had also sensed. This revelation confirmed to Gilroshan that they had indeed noticed the approaching event. The Archbishop dropped her sword onto a nearby rat, implying that someone within the Revolutionary Army was involved in the plot. Gilroshan asked how she came by that information, but the Archbishop made it clear that the answer was self-evident. Gilroshan found her a bit intimidating. She continued by explaining that their god, being one of vengeance, only provided prophecy, not prevention. The information they had was vague and incomplete. All they knew was that the catastrophe targeted the children of Aurex and that a monster was hiding within their ranks. They were working to uncover the traitor, but with the enemy embedded within the Revolutionary Army, every action they took was under surveillance, making the situation extremely delicate. Gilroshan agreed with her assessment. They were facing an unknown enemy who likely knew far more about them than they did about the traitor. Reflecting on it, Gilroshan was intrigued by the complexity of the situation hidden behind this event. Since the Archbishop had placed her trust in him, he decided to share what he knew in return. The disaster was set to strike in 10 days. The children would be targeted at the Kashiris Cathedral during the traditional coming-of-age ceremony, the ritual of the Red Wind. That was the moment the enemy would strike, when all the children were gathered. Then the grim details of the event, known as the Dying Sons Incident, were revealed. One of the priests at the Kashiris Cathedral had conceived a horrific plan. To revive the Kashiris sect, he intended to slaughter all boys aged 17 to 19 during the ritual of the Red Wind. If left unchecked, the sacred ceremony would become a scene of death and mourning. Hearing this, Marco noted that everything fit together too perfectly. The archbishop agreed, acknowledging that it was indeed the work of the Kashiris sect. Kars looked at Gilroshan with doubt, questioning whether all this was just his imagination. Sui expressed disbelief at the idea of killing one's own country's children just to boost a faction's power. Gilroshan explained that after the coming-of-age ceremony, all children in Aurochs choose their future paths, becoming priests, soldiers, merchants, or other roles. However, the Kashiris sect refused to accept male priests. Marco confirmed this detail. The Kashiris sect only allowed women or eunuch males to serve, so boys had no path into their ranks. Kars concluded that since the religion only accepted girls, the boys were seen as expendable. Gilroshan clarified that it wasn't just that. They were considered potential resources for rival factions. Kars called it insane, labeling the Kashiri sect as a lunatic cult. Sui found it hard to accept, questioning how they could turn against children who were technically still part of the same revolutionary army. The archbishop admitted that while they were part of the movement, the Kashiris faction had definitely crossed a line. She acknowledged how well Gilroshan understood their inner workings and began to feel that freeing the third prince had been the right move. With a serious tone, Archbishop Hendel Fry made a formal request to Gilroshan. As Archbishop of the Ulam Great Church, she humbly asked him to ensure that the children would not be sacrificed because of distorted faith. At that moment, the system notified that a new quest titled Savior of the Sons had been given. Gilroshan agreed to help, especially since children's lives were at stake. However, he brought up how painful it was when she tied him up earlier and jokingly requested an extra 50 gold coins if things went smoothly. The Archbishop remarked that she heard the Imperial Palace spent money carelessly. Gilroshan responded that she could surely manage that much. After all, it was for the children. The system then updated again. It confirmed a successful negotiation with a friendly NPC. The reward for the Savior of the Sons quest had increased by 50 gold coins, and a new title, Novice Negotiator, was acquired. Later that evening, the group emerged from the underground tunnel. Marco thanked them for their efforts and hoped they weren't injured, then prepared to leave. Gilroshan called out to him, asking him to wait. When Marco turned, Gilroshan questioned why someone who knew everything was pretending otherwise. He feigned being emotionally wounded by Marco's attitude. Marco sensed trouble. At this rate, even he might end up getting manipulated by the third prince. He tried to make a quick exit. Gilroshan moved swiftly and blocked his attempt, asking why he was trying to run away. He brought up a specific memory reminding Marco of a high priest who once made a promise that if Gilroshan escaped the Empire safely, a wish would be granted in the name of the god of Ulam. Marco reluctantly admitted that Gilroshan was remarkably good at collecting debts, joking that he could pass as a loan shark. Gilroshan responded with mock humility, saying that such flattery made him shy. Kars found the whole situation awkward, feeling like they were doing something wrong. Sui pointed out that they were only making sure Marco didn't escape. Marco tried to explain that some things just couldn't be retrieved. Gilroshan clarified that he wasn't asking for something beyond reach. When Marco asked what he wanted, Gilroshan requested the eyeball of Walakas. Marco was stunned, asking him to repeat the request. Gilroshan explained that it wasn't something divine or impossible. It was obtainable, and therefore not out of Marco's reach. Marco was internally baffled, wondering if Gilroshan even understood what he was saying. Eventually, Marco asked if Gilroshan knew who the item belonged to. Gilroshan casually replied that it was in the possession of the Revolutionary Army's leader. A system description then revealed more about the eyeball of Walakas. These round-framed glasses, created by demon hands, could accurately predict projectile trajectories. Gilroshan insisted that the glasses were in the leader's study and that Marco could just pick them up. He assured Marco that he didn't want to cause any trouble and pointed out that the leader was currently absent, so there wouldn't be any issues. Marco, however, remained stressed. He felt Gilroshan didn't understand the real problem. Taking belongings from the revolutionary leader was not a small matter. Marco reminded Gilroshan that as a revolutionary himself, it would be out of line for him to touch the leader's possessions. Suddenly, a new group of men approached. One of them challenged them, claiming he'd never seen their faces before, and informed them there was a toll on the road. He mocked them, calling them poor, and demanded that the young man and the old man hand over everything if they wanted to live. Gilroshan quietly registered the insult, "Old man," and wondered who the thug meant. Regardless, he realized the man had made a serious mistake. Vamila was not someone who tolerated such provocation. The thug repeated his demand, yelling at the so-called old man to hand over everything. Hearing this, Marco began to grow visibly angry. Marco, seething with anger, began to draw his sword, but Gilroshan quickly stopped him, urging him to leave this fight to him. He reminded Marco of their mission and stressed the importance of focusing on saving the children of Araxis. Despite Marco's hesitation, Gilroshan insisted, asking him to fulfill the promise made to Lady Evelyn by retrieving the glasses. Marco, surprised by Gilroshan's serious tone, questioned if he was being sincere. Suddenly, a thug interrupted, mocking Marco and calling him an old man. He declared that they couldn't just leave without paying a toll to the infamous Big Three of the back alleys. However, his companions remained silent. Gilroshan, puzzled, wondered if such NPCs even existed in the game world. Remaining unfazed, Gilroshan warned the thug that they were the lucky ones today for being spared. The thug misinterpreted this and demanded Gilroshan cover Marco's toll. At that moment, Kars arrived, asking if Gilroshan was alright. Gilroshan reminded Kars they had just escaped prison and shouldn't speak so formally in public. The thug, introducing himself as Thompson, scoffed at the situation and ordered his men to attack. As the thugs charged, Kars swiftly struck one of them with his sword. Gilroshan, dismayed, worried about losing out on valuable experience points. Before Kars could attack the second thug, Gilroshan stopped him, insisting that he wanted to handle the fight himself. Kars refused, stating that it was his duty as Gilroshan's escort knight to protect him. He confessed feeling useless during past events and expressed his determination to support the prince more actively. Gilroshan realized that Kars had been deeply affected by his previous failures and had taken them to heart. Before the argument could escalate further, the remaining thugs attempted to flee. But Sui intercepted them with fire magic, warning that she'd roast them alive if they tried to run. The thugs froze in terror. Sui then suggested letting Gilroshan fight on his own. Kars questioned her, but she emphasized the importance of Gilroshan learning to protect himself. She reminded Kars that even safe havens like the Imperial Palace had failed them, and there might come a time when neither of them could be there to help. Allowing the prince to fight would be a step toward his independence. Kars acknowledged her point, calling it a form of loyalty. The system then notified that the novice ruffian and scammer of the back alleys had been subdued. One of the thugs, trembling, begged for mercy. Kars praised Gilroshan, and Sui commended his efforts. Internally, Gilroshan admitted the fight wasn't as hard as facing someone like Elon Royd, but battling two thugs at once had still pushed his limits. He realized he needed to grow stronger quickly to survive. Kars asked what should be done with the thugs. One of them begged again, promising to live quietly if spared. But Gilroshan thought back to how letting delinquents go usually led to more trouble, as they often regrouped and sought revenge. With a bold declaration, Gilroshan revealed his identity as the Prince of the Back Alleys, claiming he had come under royal orders to take control of the area. He questioned whether someone like him would show mercy to criminals like them. Suddenly, he slashed one of the thugs with his sword. Sui, shocked by the blood, asked if that was necessary, calling it cruel. Gilroshan internally panicked, wondering if even his allies were fooled. Though there was more blood than expected, he realized the thug had fainted just from the sight of it. The system explained that the flashy bleeding effect was a result of the skill Sadistic Taste, which had minimal actual damage but dramatic visuals. Gilroshan hadn't expected to use the skill in this way. The remaining thug begged for his life, promising to do anything. Gilroshan confirmed his willingness and then asked his name, recalling it was Thompson. When Thompson agreed, Gilroshan offered him a deal, not to serve as a vassal but to act as a guide. Thompson hesitated but understood. Gilroshan clarified that he simply wanted a tour of the back alleys, not a museum trip. Urging Thompson to move quickly, he pointed out that the unconscious thug wasn't dead and they had no time to waste. The group began moving forward, with Thompson leading the way. As they walked, Gilroshan took a bite of Thompson's bread and complimented its taste. Thompson replied that his mother had packed it, praising her cooking skills. Gilroshan suddenly smacked Thompson on the head, scolding him for living like a thug despite having a caring mother. He expressed his frustration, revealing that he had never known the warmth of a mother's cooking. Hearing this, Kars questioned why the prince didn't have a mother. Sui chimed in, mentioning that he had the Empress. Gilroshan grew internally frustrated as they brought up the royal family again, realizing the act had gone on long enough. Soon, Thompson pointed out the entrance to the black market ahead and asked if he could leave now. Gilroshan dismissed the idea, reminding him that the invitation was essential for entry into the black market. Since Gilroshan needed to hide his identity, he insisted on using aliases. He urged Thompson to take the lead. Nervously, Thompson explained that only influential figures could invite someone in. As a rookie, he feared being beaten if he brought a guest. Gilroshan brushed off the concern, claiming that the title of the Big Three of the back alleys should be enough to qualify. He reassured Thompson and pushed him to knock on the door. Thompson hesitantly knocked, but Sui remarked on his weak grip and questioned if he was eating properly. Thompson responded that no one seemed to be home and suggested returning later. Ignoring him, Gilroshan forcefully knocked on the door himself, alarming Thompson. From inside, a voice demanded to know who was knocking. Thompson identified himself, hoping it would help. The man inside, confused, didn't recognize the name. Thompson explained he was from the West District and had brought a guest. The door opened, revealing a furious man who berated Thompson for his audacity. He shouted about rookies having no shame and threatened him for bringing someone without paying dues. As he demanded to know who trained him, Gilroshan interrupted and reminded the man to treat customers properly, implying business should come before insults. The man, still irritated, ignored Gilroshan and continued berating Thompson. He ordered all seniors under him to line up immediately. In response, Gilroshan extended 30 gold coins as an entrance fee. He emphasized the amount, noting that it was his entire reward for arriving in Araxis. Pal, the man at the gate, looked at the coins and calmly returned them. He stated that the black market didn't accept entrance fees and only evaluated if someone was worth dealing with. Gilroshan acknowledged this, happy to have saved money, and asked if he could enter. Pal agreed and opened the way. Gilroshan added one more condition. He wanted Thompson to be their guide. Thompson, surprised, hesitated, but Pal encouraged him to do his best. Accepting the task, Thompson promised to give it his all. Welcoming them inside, Pal led them into the black market. Sui expressed surprise at the hidden space behind the door. Kars compared it to an anthill but quickly corrected himself and addressed Gilroshan formally. Thompson asked where he should guide them next. Gilroshan directed them to the upper floor, stating that's where they needed to go. Thompson panicked, explaining that he was just a rookie and didn't know the way there. Gilroshan told him not to worry. Suddenly, Sui ran ahead, yelling for her disciple to follow. She claimed she could sense magical energy and urged them to hurry. Gilroshan muttered that witches tend to go wild when they sense magic items. The rest of the group followed her without hesitation. Meanwhile, a vendor in the market proudly displayed a rare item, boasting about a terrifying twin-headed ogre. As the group continued chasing after Sui, she stopped at a particular door, announcing the presence of a luxurious magical aura. Gilroshan reminded her of their original goal, to prepare for the upcoming disaster. Sui acknowledged that, and Kars added that acquiring a magical item for her was part of the plan. Sui asked if that was true, and Gilroshan confirmed, saying he'd been bothered by her previous outburst. Gilroshan thought to himself that despite Sui's inherited memories and maturity, she still acted like a typical 19-year-old boy at times. Sui then screamed that they had to hurry before someone else took her item. She pushed them to move quickly. Gilroshan wondered why she wasn't touched by his gesture. He then cautioned her to remain calm, warning that if the plan failed due to agitation, they wouldn't get the item. Realizing this, Sui used her powers to stabilize her emotions, smiled, and confidently stated that she was calm now. Inside the Grand Palace Hall, the Emperor sat with an expression of cold command. He turned to the Marquis and demanded to hear the report once again. The Marquis repeated himself, confirming that the third prince had headed toward the rebel capital with the aim of reclaiming the legendary artifact known as the Tears of Dawn. The Emperor gave a dry chuckle, mocking the tone of the report. He remarked on how the phrasing made it seem as if the prince had embarked on a sacred mission for the royal family. The Marquis, unfazed, reaffirmed that it was the truth. The third prince had acted alone, driven solely by the ambition to seize the Empire's great treasure. Tension filled the air around them. The Emperor narrowed his gaze and asked if the Marquis had come merely to amuse him. The Marquis insisted that he had revealed everything he knew. Accepting this, the Emperor allowed him to rise, clarifying that his disbelief stemmed from how useless Gilisan had always seemed. It was hard to accept that someone like Gilisan could have caught the prophet's disease. Turning his attention elsewhere, the Emperor asked the Lord Chamberlain for the whereabouts of the Royal Knight's captain. The Chamberlain informed him that the captain had arrived earlier and was currently on standby. Moments later, the captain entered the hall and addressed the Emperor. The Marquis glanced at him, recognizing him as Cedric Penn, the Empire's spear and the Emperor's loyal hunting dog. Though known for his blind devotion, his sudden appearance raised questions in the Marquis's mind. Without hesitation, the Emperor issued his command. Duke Penn was to select personnel skilled in stealth and place the third prince under strict surveillance. If, by chance, the prince succeeded in recovering the Tears of Dawn, he was to be brought immediately to the Imperial Palace. Should the prince resist, the use of force was permitted. Additionally, if the prince were to die, Cedric was instructed to retrieve the body at any cost. The Emperor wanted to personally verify the presence of the prophet's disease, even if it meant the body returned with missing limbs. Cedric accepted the order without question. Watching this unfold, the Marquis was silently horrified. Despite everything, the Emperor was dealing with his own son. With the orders given, the Emperor dismissed the room, allowing everyone to leave. As the Marquis departed, his thoughts turned to warning the prince. He knew the prince was being watched and felt a sense of urgency. But reaching him in the middle of Araxis would be no easy task. Gilroshan and his companions pushed open the grand door and stepped inside. Sui looked around in awe, clearly startled by the sight before her. A bright smile lit up her face as she took in the surroundings, amazed by how it felt like an entirely different world. Gilroshan reminded her to remain calm. Sui nodded, acknowledging she would keep it in mind. Suddenly, Kars pointed ahead and called for Gilroshan's attention. Gilroshan immediately snapped, questioning who Kars was calling Your Highness. Kars quickly tried to correct himself but shifted focus, gesturing towards someone in the distance. It was Ergal. Seeing Ergal, Gilroshan grew wary. His inner thoughts turned cynical, wondering what Ergal was doing here and why he looked so tense. Almost like a dog needing to relieve itself. Deciding it wasn't worth the trouble, Gilroshan told Kars to ignore him and move on. Thompson, sensing something, asked if Ergal was an acquaintance. Gilroshan admitted they knew each other, but the relationship felt uncomfortably strained, perhaps even more than he initially realized. Thompson noted that Ergal was approaching them. Ergal arrived and greeted them cheerfully. Gilroshan, confused by his overly friendly tone, found it suspicious and braced himself for a nuisance. Pretending to be polite, he tried to cut the interaction short and said they were busy. But Ergal stopped them. Kars stepped forward, warning Ergal not to address his master's name so openly. He reminded him that his lord was keeping his identity secret, and calling out his name could cause problems. Ergal took the warning seriously but quickly shifted the topic. He mentioned a promotional deal, multiple items for a lower price, and suggested teaming up for a purchase. He justified it by calling them comrades who had faced death together. Gilroshan watched him closely. Ergal's uncharacteristic behavior made him suspicious. Convinced Ergal had an ulterior motive, he turned him down. He firmly stated he didn't like doing business with others and walked away. But Ergal followed and quietly confessed something. He had come specifically to buy the Shield of Balance. That caught Gilroshan's attention. The Shield of Balance was a prized item among players. Coincidentally, he had also come for the same reason. Ergal guessed that Gilroshan might have also come for the shield. Gilroshan acknowledged that the upper floor was known as the best place to obtain it, but he felt there was more to the situation than met the eye. Ergal hesitated, then admitted he was short on money. Gilroshan was surprised. Ergal repeated his words, this time more embarrassed. Teasing him, Gilroshan pretended not to hear and made Ergal repeat it louder. Finally, he gave in, saying he understood and asked how much Ergal had. He demanded everything Ergal carried, saying he just needed enough to get him the shield. Ergal stared at him silently. Gilroshan repeated his question and insisted on seeing the full amount. He explained that the goal was just to secure the Shield of Balance. Then, without waiting, Gilroshan pulled out 92 gold coins from his inventory and transferred them. Ergal, still skeptical, warned Gilroshan not to scam him. Gilroshan assured him he kept his promises. However, he added a condition. He wouldn't do it for free. He asked that once they left this place, Ergal reveal his true identity. Seeing Ergal hesitate, Gilroshan softened his tone. He said it wasn't a big deal and promised to return the money if Ergal didn't agree. Extending his hand, he sealed the deal with a handshake. Gilroshan observed Ergal carefully. The fact that he was after the Shield of Balance at such a specific time made him wonder. Was Ergal trying to stop the Dying Sun's event too? Perhaps he had his own reasons. Still, Gilroshan considered that it might actually work in his favor. While Ergal searched for his master, he could retrieve the key. He then asked Kars to locate Master Kals and guide him to the counter nearby. Moving closer, he whispered to Kars to request the master to use illusion magic to multiply the items. Kars hesitated and brought up something that had been on his mind. He asked since when Gilroshan had the ability to use inventory magic. Gilroshan shrugged it off, saying he had just kept trying until it worked. Pleased by the effort, Kars praised him, noting that even Lady N would be proud. Gilroshan reflected on the moment. The inventory function he received upon arriving in Arax was just a convenient spell in this world. Still, it was surprising that Gilrosian, the prince of the Magic Empire, had only now mastered it. Soon after, they entered the shop where a lady welcomed them. Gilroshan inquired about the price of the Shield of Balance. She informed him it was now 120 gold. Ergal immediately pointed out that it had been 110 just moments ago. Gilroshan echoed the surprise, noting it was 10 gold more than what his friend mentioned. The lady explained that this was his first time on the upper floor, and prices here fluctuated dynamically based on the situation. Gilroshan recalled how beginners were usually scammed here. They either overpaid for an item or lost everything to shady games, even their clothes. When the lady asked if he still intended to buy, Gilroshan reflected on his past. He had previously obtained 3 notable items from this very place: the bow named Swiftkill, the magic accessory called the Forest Bracelet, and the Shield of Balance. Yet even with Ergal's 92 gold, one shield couldn't be purchased. He had only 30 gold himself. Knowing the shop's dishonest nature, Gilroshan planned to scam them back. He agreed to make a purchase but asked whether they sold the Dice of Death. The lady leaned in and whispered that they did, adding that she was just about to recommend it. She handed him a key and directed him to room 3, encouraging him to win big in return for the shield. Gilroshan agreed, inwardly amused that she was already falling for the trap, but just then he felt a piercing gaze from behind. Turning around, he found his companions staring at him, furious. Sui, outraged, reminded him that she had trusted him and followed him all the way to Orax. Now, after coming so far, he was gambling again? It felt like he had returned to his prodigal days. Flustered, Gilroshan tried to defend himself and asked Kars to stop Sui, but Kars stood silent. Gilroshan couldn't believe even Kars wouldn't back him up. Still, he acknowledged this reaction was natural considering his past. He tried once more to speak, but Sui ordered Kars to grab him, ready to deal with him herself. Kars, however, asked her to let Gilroshan explain. Embarrassed, Sui considered giving him a chance. Frustrated, Gilroshan noted that no one was listening to him, and even that felt infuriating. Gathering everyone, he clarified his intent. Gambling was betting on uncertainty, but he was certain of winning, so this wasn't true gambling. Kars responded dryly, calling such thinking a gambling addiction. Gilroshan persisted. He wasn't gambling for thrills, but taking the best path to secure magic items and prevent Orax's disaster, just as he had defeated Gromhart and Marquis Elronroit before. He asked for their trust, promising change. Convinced, Kars declared his support. Sui reluctantly agreed, seeing no other choice. Ergal, watching quietly, drew Gilroshan's attention. Gilroshan asked if he wanted his money back, but Ergal denied needing anything. With everyone on board, Gilroshan signaled to proceed to the second floor. Later, the group gathered around as Gilroshan played the game. Sui and Kars were delighted, cheering his win. They praised him, joking that he truly was their disciple. The lady across from him, clearly the dealer, admitted she had lost again. She claimed to be lucky herself, with tricks up her sleeve, and said it was rare for her to lose twice in a row. This made Gilroshan suspicious. Something didn't sit right. Though she deliberately lost 2 rounds, she remained completely unfazed. Her attire and the people with her suggested she didn't belong to this place. He couldn't read her intentions. Gilroshan, confident, suggested raising the stakes. The lady's thoughts betrayed her calm exterior. This was exactly what she wanted. She laughed inside, thinking gamblers were always the same. This was the tiger's den, and she intended to strip him of everything. Today, she planned to break them and make them slaves forever. Kars noticed her odd expression and wondered aloud if she was sick. Sui guessed she might be crying over her losses. Gilroshan disagreed. There were no tears. She was too composed, like a viper that wouldn't shed a single drop of blood. Sui urged Gilroshan to reconsider. She felt the dealer looked pressured and didn't want to raise the stakes. But Gilroshan knew better. Falling for this act would be a mistake. This was the kind of place where naivete cost everything. The lady quickly explained she had only felt a sneeze coming. Hearing this, Sui and Kars began to feel sorry for her. She used their sympathy well, pretending to be fine. She encouraged Gilroshan to raise the stakes, saying it wasn't even her own money and asking him to name his amount. Gilroshan responded cheerfully, saying it was a relief. She again reassured him to go ahead and decide the amount. Internally, Gilroshan smiled. He greeted her mentally. Hiren, a name she didn't know he was familiar with. He had always managed to beat her, and this time would be no different. Confident, he accepted the offer and prepared to enjoy the game, ready to clear her out once again. The rules of the Dice of Death were soon revealed, a board game where a token moves across tiles to collect treasure. The player who returns to the starting point wins. At first glance, it seemed like a simple game, but this was no ordinary place. Every gambling device here was infused with magic. The dice allowed movement both forward and backward, but the game only ended when a player returned to the start with the exact count. If someone got too far ahead, the smarter play was to circle back and finish first. But even that depended on the dice. The game was a perfect scam crafted to deceive clueless newcomers. Though the dice appeared fair, they followed a fixed pattern, 6, 4, 4, 1, 5, complex but consistent and skewed in favor of the dealer. But Gilroshan wasn't just any fool. While Hiren distracted him during the earlier rounds, he'd already studied the dice and cracked their sequence using techniques he mastered while playing GFW. Ready to begin, Gilroshan asked if he could bet magic items instead of gold. Hiren agreed eagerly. Gilroshan then placed a bold bet. 2 shields of balance, along with a forest bracelet and a rapid shot bolt. A nearby assistant reminded Hiren of the 3-item betting limit. She dismissed his concern with scorn, reminding him that her job was to strip fools bare, and his was to clean up if she failed. She ordered him to fetch the wagered items and post guards outside in case Gilroshan tried to escape. He obeyed with visible fear. Hiren turned back to the table with a smile, informing everyone that the items would arrive soon. Before the game started, she asked how much gold Gilroshan had on hand. Gilroshan obliged, and Kars pulled gold coins from his inventory. Hiren observed the pile, around 650 gold, and smiled inwardly. Whether through cheating or selling him as a slave, she would profit by the end of this. Once the items were brought over, Hiren declared the game ready. Gilroshan nodded. She gestured toward the dice. He handed them over casually, claiming he was unfamiliar with the rules and letting her go first. Hiren accepted, and the game commenced. Gilroshan anticipated her next roll would be a 2. He predicted she'd skip over the 50 gold treasure for now, planning to bait him with early winnings before sweeping in to claim everything. The classic gambler's strategy? Give hope before crushing it. But Gilroshan wasn't the sucker. Hiren was. He'd memorized the dice pattern and tested its reactions. Now, he was ready to flip the game. He rolled a 6. Hiren flinched. When he asked if something was wrong, she brushed it off, blaming the dry room. Gilroshan knew better. The dice were meant to land on 4, but they hadn't. She was losing control of her rigged game. Then it was Hiren's turn. She rolled and relaxed. The result fell in line with the expected sequence, but the treasure was 1 tile away, perfectly staged for him to win next. Kars and Sui chimed in, lightheartedly teasing Gilroshan, saying he should roll from the heart. He didn't mind. For once, he didn't have to fake disappointment. Hiren reassured them that moving backward was allowed, keeping the hope alive. She rolled a 2, aiming for a 5, and missed the gold. Worse, she accidentally gave herself a reward meant for Gilroshan. Her confusion grew, the pattern was breaking down, and she didn't know why. Gilroshan, however, knew the secret. The key wasn't just recognizing the pattern, but altering it subtly, what veteran players called a phantom roll. He'd nudged the dice mid-roll to skip ahead. When he glanced at Urgal, he wondered how someone who outsmarted Grumhart couldn't recognize this trick. But Urgal promised to reveal his identity after receiving the shield, so for now, Gilroshan focused on dismantling Hiren. With that, he secured another win. Sui celebrated cheerfully, claiming it was thanks to rolling from the heart. Gilroshan observed Irgal's face and thought that the emotion didn't suit him. Then, he handed Irgal the shield, which he accepted quietly. Hiran, still smiling, offered to continue the game. Gilroshan agreed and rolled a perfect 4. He remarked casually on his good fortune. But this time he hadn't manipulated the dice. He didn't need to. From now on, he would only adjust the rolls just enough to look like a lucky amateur. He suspected Hiran was beginning to doubt his innocence. But even if she figured it out, it would already be too late. He planned to clean the place out long before that moment came. Once Hiran realized the truth, she'd be the one exposed. She smiled again and commented that maybe today really was one of those lucky days. She'd felt the same once before, right before she made a killing.